I'm your bedtime historian, and I've always found it funny that the ocean, a place meant to wash secrets clean, became the loudest witness to crimes nobody wanted to see. Tonight, it's not storms or shipwrecks that will keep you awake, but the hush of waves that once carried pirate queens toward their strange fates. Picture the stolen ships first creaking under stolen spices and trembling sailors, salt spray stinging your cheeks as you stand on the deck. Some nights, the sea is calm enough to hear a captain's boots crossing planks slick with rain. But these captains are not who you'd expect. Beneath battered tricorn hats, braids coil like hidden rope. Their eyes sharper than any cutlass search the horizon for sails and patrols. If you've ever wondered how a woman centuries ago could seize a brig and lead men twice her size into a storm, you're not alone. Historians still debate whether these women were pirates by choice or circumstance folk heroes or criminals forced by hunger and war to hoist the black flag. Legends swirl about figures like Bonny and Ching names whispered like salt through old taverns. Some say Anne fought in trousers, pistol at her hip, swearing at cowards to fire faster. Others claim Ching commanded entire fleets ruling South China's sea lanes with rules stricter than any navy. The truth, somewhere between cannon fire and ballads sung by drunks. You'll feel the decks rock beneath your bare feet tonight, soft sea wind twisting hair across your brow. Every stolen ship creaks with 1,000 rumors. Did they really bury treasure? Did they spare the crews they boarded? Or did the ocean swallow every witness and memory like a mouth forever hungry for secrets? A passing gull shrieks overhead as the sails billow wide. You can almost hear sailors muttering prayers in dialects long forgotten. Below deck, damp powder kegs jostle near barrels of rum. Some say it was the drink, more than the cannon, that kept mutiny at bay. One overlooked fact: female pirates often use storms to their advantage. Where lumbering royal frigates feared tempests, smaller pirate sloops darted through squalls like seabirds slipping patrols too cautious to follow. Some crews swore the captains could smell a storm before the clouds formed. A single mast cracks under a sudden gust. Your heart thuds like distant drums. This stolen ship you stand on was once a merchant's pride, now repainted in the colors of rebellion. Sometimes it bore a flag with no skull at all, just a ragged scrap to fool a Navy scout long enough to slip away. What happened to the gold and spices once they made landfall? That's a question historians still argue over. Some believe hidden island caches remain undiscovered, while skeptics insist most pirate loot paid for tavern tabs and bribes before the next voyage. Picture the deck now, rope coiled in tidy piles, the wheel groaning as the helmswoman adjusts course. Somewhere below, the captain pores over a hand-drawn map by candlelight, her fingers ink-stained tracing shoals and currents. She listens for the creak that means betrayal or a sudden storm brewing above. A quirky rumor clings to these women, some tied ribbons in their hair, before a raid bright scraps of silk from plundered ships' superstition to keep death guessing which head to take. Sailors swap these scraps as tokens bragging about the day they sailed under a pirate queen. Scholars remain divided over how many of these stories hold truth. Folk tales expand faster than sails in a strong wind. Yet each tale leaves behind a salt-rimmed trail for us to follow tonight. If your eyelids grow heavy, don't fight it. This is only the first wave. Next, you'll drift into smoky taverns, where conspiracies bloom under flickering lanterns and whispered deals decide who lives, who sails, and who vanishes when dawn breaks. A lantern flickers behind a warped tavern door, its glow spilling onto muddy cobblestones where boot prints vanish into puddles. Inside, the hum of secrets threads through low laughter and the clink of pewter mugs. Here, among sticky tables and damp barrels, you slip into the hidden world of pacts, sealed with a nod, a coin, and the hush of conspirators too careful to speak above a whisper. Picture yourself wedged into a splintered bench near the hearth. The air smells of spilled rum, burnt tallow, and wet wool drying by the fire. A serving girl passes her apron, hiding a small dagger tucked near her hip. In these shadowy corners, innkeepers act as gatekeepers of the pirate underworld. Some offered safe beds to queens of the sea bribed officials to look the other way, and spread rumors to keep royal patrols guessing at shadows that slipped through coastal towns like ghosts. One curious fact: many of these taverns kept secret trap doors under the ale barrels. Some led to tunnels carved into seaside cliffs, quick escapes if the king's men pounded on the door. Stories linger of pirate captains vanishing through floorboards, only to reappear 2 towns over fresh-faced and ready to toast another stolen ship. A rough cough behind you reminds you that trust is a slippery thing here. Among the flickering candlelight alliances form over tankards of watered-down beer. A single spilled secret might earn you a rope around your neck or a seat at a captain's table. Surviving court documents hint that some innkeepers doubled as informants feeding the Navy half-truths while slipping silver to smugglers in the same breath. Rumors swirl that a few taverns even minted false pirate coins to keep the local economy buzzing. Some coins bore marks so crude that modern historians debate whether they were genuine currency or clever tokens to buy silence and safe passage. Whispers from aging ledgers speak of debts settled with barrels of rum and hush money hidden behind ale kegs. You glance toward a corner table where 2 cloaked figures lean close. Maybe it's a pair of runaway sailors, or maybe a captain's lieutenant bargaining for safe anchorage. A scrap of parchment changes hands, and the flick of a candle casts shadows across furrowed brows and clasped fingers. Nobody raises a voice. The louder the tavern, the softer the deals. One quirky detail: some pirate queens insisted on sharing drinks with the tavern folk, laughing loudest so no one suspected they carried maps sewn into their bodices. Legend says one such captain, her name lost to history, wore a locket containing not a lover's portrait, but a folded treaty with a local magistrate guaranteeing she'd never hang so long as she paid in silver and silence. Scholars remain divided about whether these tales are half-truths brewed strong by centuries of gossip. Some claim the taverns were nothing more than ordinary inns, their secrets invented by storytellers drunk on pirate ballads. Others argue the truth lies somewhere in the sawdust, between the floorboards inked in invisible ledgers never meant to see daylight. Outside, the wind rattles the shutter. The night thickens like molasses as you imagine the hush of conspiracies layered under the barkeep's polite smile. A ship waits offshore, sails furled like folded wings. Crew huddled below deck until a lantern flickers twice at the tavern door. Proof the coast is clear. You lean back, feel the warmth of the hearth creep up your spine. The ale in your mug is cheap, but the price of loose lips could buy you a cell or worse. Somewhere above, a floorboard, creaks maybe a hidden attic where the tavern owner keeps a ledger scribbled in code. Historians have found scraps of such books, cargo lists written backward, names swapped for symbols, whole pages soaked in brine to blur ink before discovery. It makes you wonder how many of these hidden pacts still drift in the salt air, waiting for an unwary historian to stumble on a brittle scrap behind a tavern beam. Some secrets never sleep. They just linger in the smell of spilled rum and the hush of voices too cautious to rise above a whisper. You drain your mug as the door swings open, bringing with it the smell of wet rope and cold mist. Outside, a figure waits half hidden by the swirl of fog rolling in from the docks. It's time to slip out the back, follow the alley to where the waves slap against barnacled piers and board the ship that hunts rebels under a moon cloaked in cloud. A chill wind cuts across the deck as you step from the shadow of the tavern's back alley onto creaking planks slick with salt and fog. The ship you've boarded feels alive beneath your boots, wood groaning as it rides the restless tide. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolls a soft warning that royal patrols stalk these waters tonight. Picture the fog first thick enough to swallow a cannon's roar. Lanterns swing from masts, their light smothered to faint halos that do little to pierce the gloom. You stand by the rail, breath frosting as your eyes scan the shifting gray for shapes that don't belong. Somewhere out there, a naval cutter waits, sails trimmed tight, its crew wide awake, while the coastline dozes under damp blankets. Female captains knew these straits like the lines in their palms. Some disguised their ships to pass as harmless traders, sails patched with old merchant flags to fool prying eyes. A captain might dress her crew in mismatched coats and half-faded insignia, so from afar they looked like fishermen or wandering merchants hunting better ports. Scholars still argue how many warships these disguises outwitted, how often the king's ships ghosted past rebels hiding in plain sight. Feel the tension now, the hush broken only by the scrape of a deckhand's boot or the low hum of a whispered prayer. A sudden splash, just a rope dropped overboard, or something more sinister. Tales drift through naval logs of female pirates who ordered decoy barrels floated down channels to confuse patrols buying just enough time to slip into moonlit coves and vanish. One overlooked detail. Some ships carried decoy cargo, salted fish packed on top of smuggled spices, or bolts of stolen silk hidden under crates of onions. Inspectors hated onions, or so the stories claim. A trick of the nose, a sleight of hand, small details that meant the difference between freedom and the iron cell of a prison reeking of brine. You stand near the bow now, where the figurehead, once a saint, has been carved into something new. A woman's face, wind-battered and smiling, staring forever into the night. Some say these figureheads were charmed to ward off bad weather and ill luck. Others whisper they marked ships captained by women, a subtle sign for those who knew what to watch for among the breakers and reefs. A single shout cuts through the fog. The lookout points toward the faint shape of a sail naval white, a crest barely visible in the drifting mist. On deck, the crew scatters sails drawn tighter ropes, whipped into obedient knots. The captain calm as dawn stands near the wheelcoat collar, turned high hair tucked beneath a battered hat. She barks soft orders, her voice steady enough to soothe the greenest deckhand. A historian's quill scratches at the edge of your mind how many ships like this one slipped past patrols while their pursuers fumbled in the dark. Some scholars remain puzzled by the sheer number of naval chases that ended with nothing but empty water and the mocking cry of gulls. Below-deck barrels knock against each other as the hull tilts with a sudden turn. You imagine the crew bracing in the dim lantern light knives strapped to belts, pistols wrapped in oilcloth to keep the damp at bay. Maybe there's a coded message tucked into the captain's boot, a last resort if the sails fail and the sea betrays their hiding places. A quirky rumor: some pirates trained birds' gulls or ravens to scout ahead, carrying scraps of bright cloth to signal safe passage or hidden shallows. Historians bicker over whether these feathered messengers ever really existed, or if they're just bedtime stories for sailors who needed something magical to believe in when the wind howled too close. The naval patrol draws nearer. You feel it like a heartbeat under the boards, pulsing with the tension of men who can't afford to fire first, but won't hesitate if cornered. Somewhere beyond the fog, cannons wait primed with powder dry enough to spark ruin if the wind shifts wrong. Your breath catches as the ship heels sharply to starboard, slipping behind a jagged spit of rocks only locals know to avoid. The patrol's lanterns flicker once-twice and then vanish behind curtains of mist as your ship ghosts into safer channels. It's not freedom yet, but it's a breath of it, a stolen hour before the sea demands another gamble. Ahead lie courtrooms and crooked deals, iron bars waiting for the unlucky, and judges eager to prove they hold sway over those who mock the crown with every stolen tide. The fog lifts at dawn, replaced by the hard, pale light of a city harbor, where the salt breeze mixes with the cold stink of coal fires and damp stone walls. Here, the dance of stolen sails and whispered tavern deals ends beneath beams and iron gates, where pirate queens must face the judges who claim the sea for the crown. You slip into a wooden courtroom, the air stale with sweat and ink, the benches worn smooth by countless prisoners who sat here before. Chains clink as the accused are led forward, boots scuffing across warped planks that groan under their weight. These women, so fearless under black flags and roaring storms, now stand with chins lifted, eyes sharp, despite the heavy manacles. Some wear old finery, faded coats, trimmed with stolen lace tokens of defiance, in a hall that expects them to beg. Imagine the hush that falls when a judge-powdered wig slightly askew taps his gavel. The crowd leans in. Dockworkers, merchants, housewives with baskets perched on their laps, all hungry for a scandal worth repeating over bread and ale. They want to see these women broken confessing secrets that will echo through taverns long after the gavel falls silent. One curious fact: some female pirates were so good at spinning tales that their trials blurred into performances. Court scribes noted speeches so persuasive that judges hesitated, uncertain if they'd been lied to or led gently toward a bargain. Some captains offered coded maps in exchange for freedom, their fingers tracing invisible routes across courtroom tables, while naval officers leaned closer, hungry for hidden harbors and buried spoils. There's a rumor that certain judges loved these whispered negotiations. A crooked deal here, a signed pardon, they're anything to claim a portion of plunder before it vanished into bribes or rival pockets. Surviving records conflict wildly about who betrayed whom. Some claim entire pirate crews bought their freedom by naming royal sympathizers in far-flung ports. Others insist confessions were forged long after the gavel struck. The captains knew when to plead and when to sneer. One woman, her name lost to moth-eaten ledgers, reportedly laughed in the judge's face when asked where she'd hidden her gold. Her answer, scribbled half-legible in a clerk's margin, reads, "Where you'll never sail deep enough to find it." Historians still argue if that line was true, or just court gossip embroidered by scribes hoping for a raise. Your seat creaks as you shift, watching a prosecutor stand powdered cuffs twitching with every jab of his finger. He calls the women criminals, witches, temptresses of honest sailors. He fans the gallery's thirst for punishment, describing raids on sugar ships and tobacco runners as if each barrel of stolen spice were a dagger to the empire's throat. Yet beside you sits a clerk, scratching each word onto parchment, his quill tapping like a heartbeat. Some of these records survive just enough to reveal contradictions that puzzle modern scholars. How could one pirate be sentenced to hang while another vanished from her cell? Days later, name crossed out in neat ink with no explanation. One overlooked detail: some pirate queens carried letters of mark royal permission to raid enemy ships during war, only to be labeled outlaws when peace returned. A technicality turned heroes into criminals overnight. In hushed chambers, judges sometimes bartered clemency for secrets about foreign ports or naval weaknesses, deals inked on parchment and hidden in family archives that gather dust to this day. The smell of the courtroom is heavy now. Sweat-damp wool, the acrid tang of candle smoke that flickers in brass sconces. Somewhere near the back, a scribe dabs his brow with a stained kerchief. He's heard enough tales of hidden treasure to retire if half were true. But paper is patient. It listens, holds contradictions tight between its creased folds, and waits for some half-dreaming historian to pry them open centuries later. You lean forward as the judge raises his gavel again. The verdict will come soon, yet you know it rarely ended here. Chains would rattle down stone steps to prison cells slick with brine secrets, traded for scraps of stale bread and promises no king ever signed in good faith. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the iron locks clank, the hush of a coded message scratched on a scrap of cloth, a name bargained for freedom beneath the judge's table. Outside these walls, salt wind still tastes of rebellion, and somewhere, a pirate ship waits for a captain who might yet slip free. Ahead, the doors swing open, leading you into the damp stone corridors, where iron bars and hidden letters keep their secrets long after the gavel's echo fades. You step from the stiff hush of the courtroom into a corridor where the air turns cold stone walls, sweating salt from the sea beyond. The scent hits you first: brine, old straw, and rust, followed by the hollow clang of iron as a cell door swings on tired hinges. Welcome to the prisons, where pirate queens waited for promises to break or be honored in secret. Imagine the row of cells, narrow damp vaults, carved into fortress walls that crumble a little more with each tide. Barrels of salted pork stacked near buckets of stale water, both crawling with fat-bellied rats that scurry when a lantern approaches. Some prisoners bribe the guards with what they have left: rings hidden in hems, trinkets tucked under splintered floorboards. Others trade stories for scraps of bread, desperate to keep breath in their lungs, while the sea laps at the prison stones just beyond reach. One fact, too easily lost in the musty dark: some captured women wrote coded letters on scraps of sailcloth or old invoices pressed flat under their bedding until a sympathetic guard agreed to smuggle them past the watchtower. Historians have recovered a few ink faded to ghost trails that hint at secret roots, hidden allies, or the names of those who betrayed them. Scholars continue to debate whether these letters were desperate fiction or lifelines that turned the tide of more than one trial. Listen close, and you might hear the scrape of a quill, the soft scratch of a name repeated 3 times to confuse any prying eyes. In one cell, a prisoner scratches symbols into the mortar with a spoon's worn edge. She pauses when footsteps echo on the stairwell guards, carrying lanterns that drip wax onto the stone as they pass. They don't always check every corner. Secrets thrive in shadows, too cramped for daylight. A peculiar rumor drifts down through centuries. Some pirate captains bribe jailers not with gold, but with recipes. Yes, recipes. One coded letter found in a musty archive detailed how to brew a curative tea for seasickness. Another describes salted fish packed in a way to last twice as long at sea. Whether these strange gifts bought freedom or simply favor is lost to the inkblots of time. But somewhere, a scholar still puzzles over a battered parchment with herbs scribbled between threats and pleas. Your boots shift on the damp stone as you peer through the bars. A young woman huddles near the wall cloak, pulled tight against the cold. She hums softly, an old shanty that once rose from a deck, now replaced by the hiss of waves crashing against the outer prison wall. Her hair is cropped short, likely a punishment or a disguise she never finished. She hides a tiny scrap of parchment in her boot, just a name and the outline of an island where she hopes a pardon might sail her someday. Above a tiny window weeps rain into the straw. Salt crusts the iron bars, where sea spray finds its way in with each high tide. Some prisoners believe the sea itself is listening, waiting to pull their stories back into its depths, away from gavel and gallows. In the corridor, a guard trades whispers with a visitor, a lawyer perhaps, or someone less official, but more useful. Deals are struck in corners where the torchlight can't follow. Did she bribe him with secrets of buried gold, or the promise of more names to fill the next dockside trial? Historians argue endlessly about the fairness of these exchanges. The truth washed clean by bribes, threats, and the simple passage of years. A quirky detail you might like: sometimes prisoners carve tiny ships into the wooden beams above their bunks. Scholars found these ghost fleets centuries later, little reminders that freedom sailed just beyond reach, painted in daydreams when the nights grew too heavy to bear. Listen to the drip of water, echoing through the stone now. Each drop is a heartbeat, counting out the days until a verdict arrives, or a rope waits at dawn's first light. Some cells stay locked for years, the prisoner's name forgotten, the crime overwritten by new gossip and fresher trials. Step closer to the bars, press your palm against the cold iron. Feel how the prison hums with stories, rusted chains that remember secrets whispered when no judge could hear. Beyond these walls, the taverns still buzz, the sea still swallows what the courts leave behind. And somewhere, a coded letter floats inside a sailor's pocket, ready to change a pirate queen's fate if only the right hands unfold it. Beyond the prison gates, rumors stir that a pardon waits, or a peculiar punishment stranger than chains. But that restless dreamer comes later. For now, the sea-salted walls stand silent, holding secrets too stubborn to drown. A single lantern flickers near the tavern's warped window, throwing long shadows over the sticky floorboards where gossip drips thicker than spilled ale. Here, far from the salt-damp prison cells, rumors curl like pipe smoke around tankards and candle stubs. Rumors of confessions forced under iron fists or coaxed by whispered threats that never found their way into the court's tidy ledgers. Slip inside and feel the hush swell as you settle near the hearth. The smell of cheap ale and stale bread is heavy enough to coat your tongue. Overhead, a low beam sags under the weight of secrets too risky to say aloud by daylight. Someone laughs, a brittle sound that dies as quickly as it came. The talk tonight is of captured women who confessed to crimes they swore they never did, or bargains made to protect children left in harbor towns now watched by Navy spies. One overlooked fact: many forced confessions never survived the courtroom's ink. Instead, they traveled by rumor, carried from port to port by sailors eager for a tale worth a free drink. Some said the pirates wept in candlelit cells, promising to reveal hidden coves in exchange for mercy that rarely came. Others insisted confessions were never spoken at all, only scribbled by bored clerks desperate to close a case before supper grew cold. Imagine leaning close to a table where three old sailors swap half-truths over watered-down gin. One claims he heard a jailer admit the confession was faked. Another swears he saw a woman smile when she signed her name, knowing full well the words on the parchment were lies she spun to keep her crew safe. Scholars remain tangled in these contradictions, pawing through battered depositions where ink blots hide just as much as they reveal. A peculiar rumor flickers like the flame in the tavern's lone lantern. Sometimes these whispered confessions changed hands in back rooms before they ever reached a judge. A bribe here, a threat there, whole paragraphs adjusted to suit whoever paid best. Some stories suggest a few pirate queens even dictated the wording themselves, ensuring their secrets died with them and not in the gossipy mouth of a court clerk. Your eyes drift to the corner where a young man strums a battered lute. His song winds around the chatter like ivy, each note tangled with verses that praise or damn the pirate women who once sailed free. In the hush between chords, you catch snatches of hushed conversation, a name, a place, the jingle of coins passed palm to palm under the table. A man lowers his voice, insists his uncle's friend guarded the prison, and heard confessions shouted through iron bars, only to echo back as silence in the judge's chamber. There's a detail too easy to miss among spilled tankards and creaking stools. Some prisoners crafted confessions with riddles tucked between lines. A coded message to allies waiting outside or to future smugglers eager to find a lost cache buried beneath palm trees and shifting sand. Historians debate whether these riddles were real or the wishful dreaming of romantics desperate to see pirates as freedom fighters, not criminals bound for the noose. Lean back now, feel the fire's warmth creep up your sleeves as the tavern grows louder, voices competing with the winter wind that rattles the shutters. A barmaid weaves through the throng, balancing mugs, while pretending not to listen to secrets dropped like coins on the table. Somewhere in her apron pocket, maybe a note waits to be delivered to a dockhand who'll slip it to a ship's quartermaster before dawn. One more curious whisper, it's said that families sometimes paid tavern owners to start rumors about forced confessions. A daughter's shame softened by a tale that her betrayal was no choice at all. In the next village over, the story might change again. A pirate queen turned loyal wife, forced to speak treason only to save her children from the gallows shadow. Listen to the creak of the tavern door swinging wide. A gust of cold sweeps through scattering candle flames and sending whispers deeper into the shadows. Outside, the street glistens with rain, horse hooves splashing through puddles that shimmer with moonlight and rumor alike. So, sip your ale, hush your breath, and let the voices drift past your ear like ghosts. Forced confessions or tales spun from drunken lips, nobody agrees where truth ends and legend begins. The gavel may fall in court, but in this tavern, secrets spill like cheap gin, filling the night with the soft clink of coin and the hush of a lie too good to let die. Beyond these crooked tables, a royal pardon waits for the lucky and a punishment stranger still for those whose confessions left judges scratching their wigs in doubt. Beyond the tavern's smoky hush and the prison's salt-stung stones lies a parchment no pirate truly trusted, a royal pardon, crisp and gilded with seals that promised freedom, yet demanded peculiar things in return. step into the cold dawn with that pardon clutched in your palm and feel its weight, a scrap of forgiveness bought with secrets, betrayals, or conditions that twisted liberty into another form of exile. Picture the dockside first. A woman stands with chains still clinging to her wrists, the iron bite leaving red bands on skin already raw from prison manacles. Beside her, an official powdered wig, askew boots, slick with harbor mud, reads aloud the king's decree. Nearby, a handful of onlookers crane their necks for scandal fishermen waiting to haul the next day's catch dock hands, pausing mid-load to watch a pirate queen step back into the world she once defied. One overlooked fact: pardons rarely came free. Some demanded the newly freed captain vanish to an island so remote even the charts hesitated to mark it. Rumor has it, these remote settlements were paradise on paper, but barren rocks in truth, hardly more than open-air prisons with no walls, only salt spray and howling gulls, to remind exiles they still belong to the crown's mercy. Imagine the slip of parchment crumpling in her hand as she boards a creaking rowboat bound for her so-called sanctuary. The crew rows in silence, eyes darting to the horizon where a naval cutter hovers to ensure the promise of banishment is kept. Some historians argue these islands were watched day and night. Others insist the patrols faded once the king's men grew bored, leaving exiles to fish farm or slip away under moonlight aboard ships captained by sympathetic smugglers. In scattered archives, scraps of letters hint at pardoned pirates who reappeared years later, new names inked on tavern ledgers, old tricks whispered to fresh crews ready to test their luck. Some even claim a few women returned as spies for the crown, using their knowledge of hidden coves and secret trading routes to hunt their former allies. Whether this is truth or rumor, scholars still can't agree, squinting at half-burned dispatches tucked among dull royal inventories. One peculiar detail: a few royal pardons came with demands so strange they read more like cruel jokes than legal documents. A captain might be required to marry a loyal naval officer, an arrangement as brittle as the parchment itself, meant to bind rebellious bloodlines back to the crown. Some of these unions birthed entire webs of intrigue: children who never knew their mother's secrets, husbands who looked the other way when their wives slipped out to meet old allies beneath moonlit piers. If you stand at the edge of one of those lonely islands, pebbles sharp under your soles, gulls crying overhead, you can almost hear the ghost of cannon fire, the echo of boots thudding across stolen decks. The ocean forgets no oath, no betrayal, no promise, scrawled in salt and ink. Some exiled pirates sent messages in bottles, tiny scripts tucked among cork and wax prayers, that someday their old crews would find them, rescue them, or simply remember their name. Historians still dig through colonial records, tax rolls, even shipping manifests, hunting for clues that these pardoned captains ever truly stayed put. Some say their footprints are there, hidden in sudden spikes in fishing yields or strange trade goods that should never have reached certain ports. Others argue these stories are just the sea's way of spinning myths for sleepless historians to chase through musty archives. Now step back from the island shore, back to the bustling dock, where a pardon is read for the crowd's benefit, but felt only in the tight knot of a pirate's throat. Freedom tastes thin when it's measured by the crown's whim. The woman stands chains gone, but freedom heavy on her shoulders, eyes cast to the restless horizon. A sharp wind cuts through her hair as she boards the skiff that will ferry her to exile. A hush follows her dock workers, muttering bets on whether she'll stay put, vanish, or return at the head of a new, rougher crew. The parchment flutters in her hand, but her eyes linger on the sea, instead reading a map only she can see. One last curious rumor, it said a few pirate queens folded their pardons into paper boats, setting them adrift to sink in the same waters they once ruled. Historians argue if any parchment truly drowned, or if they simply sailed back on the tide, a reminder that no king's ink can anchor the sea's wild promise forever. Ahead lie arranged marriages, spy games, and tangled vows sworn under flickering lanterns, each a new knot in the web that kept these women sailing, no matter how many times the crown tried to tie them down. Follow the parchment's trail from wind-battered islands back to the mainland's flickering hearths, where pardons didn't always mean retirement, but rather a new stage for cunning roles. Marriages that doubled as spy networks, alliances woven from silk sheets and whispered secrets. Imagine a pirate queen stepping off her rowboat not in chains, but in a borrowed gown hair, pinned just so eyes scanning a crowded dock for the naval officer she's been promised to by royal decree. Some called it mercy, marrying an ex-pirate to a loyal Navy man to tame her wild blood. Others called it insurance, an oath that bound a rebel heart to the king's service, whether it beat freely or not. But beneath the lace cuffs and carefully arranged smiles, rumors stirred of double lives. A captain's wife by candlelight, a clandestine informant by moonrise. Picture the quiet corner of a seaside manor where a newly minted Navy wife leans over a letter by the hearth. The parchment looks innocent, a list of household expenses perhaps. But between the lines, subtle slashes and dots map out patrol routes, hidden coves, and safe harbors where old friends wait under false names. Historians have puzzled over diaries, found centuries later, pages scorched around the edges, yet preserving enough clues to hint at secret dispatches traded for coin favors or leverage against rivals. One overlooked fact: some ex-pirates never stopped sailing. They simply swapped the Jolly Roger for the Crown's flag, slipping information to whichever side offered the safer harbor that month. A husband might sail out on patrol by dawn, while his wife slipped down a garden path by dusk, leaving coded notes under loose stones at the dock. Local fishmongers, midwives, even tavern girls played their parts, carrying snippets of gossip that, stitched together, became whole maps of fleet movements and coastal forts. Some records, half-burned, smudged by generations of curious clerks, claim entire networks were built from these unlikely alliances. One letter found behind a manor wall, centuries later, lists ships that vanished without a trace, days after a captain's wife hosted a harmless dinner for her husband's squadron. Scholars still disagree. Were these women loyal informants for the king, or double agents feeding rebels with every lullaby sung to a Navy child? Step into a candlelit room. Now velvet drapes pulled tight against the night, a polished table spread with decanters of wine and plates of sugared fruit. The officer sits stiff-backed, uniform crisp, watching his wife pour him a drink with a smile as calm as a tide at dawn. She laughs at his tales of storm-chased frigates and crewmen with frostbitten fingers. Yet her mind drifts to messages waiting under floorboards, to coded scraps slipped to servants who know better than to ask questions. A curious detail, it's whispered, that some ex-pirates turned their new homes into safe houses for spies and smugglers. Secret panels in cellars, old tunnels, once used for contraband, now serving as bolt holes for informants on the run. These places became rumors themselves. Tavern gossip that a flickering candle in a widow's attic meant the Navy's secrets were slipping through the fog yet again. You might imagine one such wife, her hair streaked with salt and candle smoke, writing in a diary by moonlight. She records household chores and harvest tallies, then buries a line beneath mundane tasks. 4 ships anchor, by dawn hide west past shoals. Whether any of these coded pages survive by luck or design, historians still argue. Some claim the diaries were deliberate traps, left to confuse any clerk who stumbled upon them. Others see truth in the margins proof that pirate queens never truly lowered their sails. Lean closer, now hear the soft click of boots in a hallway as the officer returns from his patrol. He kisses her cheek, smells the ink on her fingers, but says nothing. Maybe he knows. Maybe he's in on the game too. A tidy pension for loyalty on paper, a blind eye turned toward midnight signals flashing from a distant cove. A peculiar rumor drifts through old coastal villages. A few children born from these unions carried hidden maps in their minds, roots whispered at bedtime family legends wrapped in riddles about who their mothers really were. Some grew up to claim ships of their own, carrying on a legacy the crown thought safely drowned in pardons and parlor rooms. Outside the manor walls, gulls cry over shifting tides, reminders that no promise inked in royal blue can bind a heart once it's tasted freedom on salt winds. Beneath the wedding bands and perfumed letters lies a truth as restless as the sea spy networks, woven from silk and secrets marriages that were never truly chains, only sails in disguise. Ahead, beyond candlelight and coded diaries, graves wait by the surf-quiet places where rumor says these pirate queens still keep watch even if their bones lie weathered beneath crooked stones. Step away from the flickering candlelit parlors and slip down to the shoreline where the wind cuts sharper than any judge's gavel and grave markers lean drunkenly against the push of the sea. Here by lonely coastal graves, rumor claims pirate queens rest beneath crooked stones, crusted with salt spray and lichen. Their ships long gone, their secrets half buried under shifting dunes and brambles, yet their names cling to the wind like salt on your lips. Picture yourself standing at the edge of one such graveyard, a wind-swept spit of land, where grass tangles around slate slabs, carved by hands that likely feared the very women they now claim to honor. A few graves are marked with names that still appear in crumbling ledgers. Anne Bonny Mary. Read though historians argue fiercely over whether any of these stones truly guard the bones they boast of sheltering. A curious fact, coastal villagers often claimed pirate graves as local legends, bragging that a pirate queen lay buried just beyond the dunes, her treasure hidden in the roots of old oaks or beneath the church floorboards nearby. Some stones bear dates that conflict wildly with trial records, as if the dead themselves rewrote time to stay hidden from the king's tax collectors, or from curious historians prying centuries later. Imagine the soft crunch of your boots across broken shells and sodden sand. In some places, crude wooden crosses rot beside proper headstones, the names whittled away by wind and brine until they're nothing but a suggestion of a life that once commanded whole crews. Local children dare each other to touch these markers at dusk, swearing they'll feel the cold rush of ghostly whispers, telling them where to dig for coins long lost to the tide. One overlooked detail, some pirate queens, it's said, arranged their own burials long before the final rope tightened around their throats or the sea swallowed them whole. A coded letter, a trusted smuggler paid in advance these stories, hint that a handful chose where their bones would rest far from city gallows and courtroom ledgers in secret spots only a few trusted souls ever found. Scholars continue to bicker over the truth buried beneath each weathered stone. Did these women truly lie here deep under sand and dune grass? Or did they fake their deaths, slip away under new names, and leave behind empty graves for future generations to puzzle over by candlelight. Some argue these contradictions feed a folk hero's flame better than any preserved bone ever could. Trace your finger along a chipped epitaph and feel the grooves where time has gnawed away at half the letters. A skull and crossbones. Here, an anchor there, motifs that might mark a pirate's resting place, or simply a fisherman's grave, depending on which local legend you choose to believe. The line blurs easily when salt air and village gossip get involved. A peculiar rumor lingers among fishermen who dock nearby. They say if you pour a dram of rum over certain graves on the night of a new moon, the wind will carry your secrets out to sea, whispered to the ghost of a pirate queen who will guard them for you, just as she guarded her ships from greedy kings and traitorous crews. Of course, whether any of this holds truth, scholars remain politely skeptical, squinting at the folklore with half smiles and full notebooks. You step closer to a gravestone nearly swallowed by dunes, only the top visible above sand that shifts with each storm. Some locals swear the sea tries to reclaim these women again and again, dragging away stones, scattering bones, erasing all evidence that they ever defied the crown with a ship's wheel in hand. Yet every few decades a fierce gust or a curious child's shovel uncovers a name once more, and the stories surge back like a high tide. By your feet, a rusted locket lies half buried, a trinket lost, or an offering left by someone who still believes these pirate queens watch the surf, guarding old pacts and half-forgotten betrayals. Imagine bending down, brushing away sand, feeling the cold metal like a heartbeat in your palm. Does it belong to the woman beneath this stone, or to someone who came later, hoping to borrow her legend for courage? Night closes in as you stand among these graves, the wind carrying salt and stories in equal measure. Beyond the dunes, waves break in steady rhythm, an echo of cannon fire, whispered oaths, and boots pacing stolen decks under starlight. Here memory clings to stones that might hold nothing at all, or everything that matters about women too stubborn to sink without a trace. Just beyond the gravestones, the tavern doors creak open again in your mind's eye, ballads drifting out praising pirate queens as rebels, rogues, and sometimes oddly enough saints for the desperate. But those songs belong to the gallows now, where their names find a second life in verses sung to half-empty mugs and firelight. Follow the salt wind from those lonely coastal graves to the crowded gallows yards where the final chapters of Pirate Queens were often written, not in court records, but in ballads, rough songs soaked in ale and carried from one smoky tavern to another until the truth blurred into melody. If you stand beneath the old timbers now, you can almost hear a distant hum, the echo of boots shuffling through muddy yards as townsfolk gathered to watch justice, or so they called it, swing from a rope. Picture the gallows at dawn, a crude wooden scaffold, damp with morning mist ropes, hanging stiff as the crowd presses close boots, sinking into churned mud, where last night's rain mixed with sawdust and spilt cider. Some came for the spectacle, others for the chance to claim they'd seen the infamous pirate queen herself stare down the hangman without a single tear. One curious fact: not every execution ended in silence. Sometimes, ballads were born right there in the crowd lines, mumbled by a wandering fiddler, half remembered by a fishmonger who'd later pass it to a tavern singer in exchange for a pint. The verses shifted with every telling. One version paints the pirate as a villain, another as a folk hero, cheated by cruel judges and cowardly naval officers. Scholars still argue who wrote these songs. First, dockside poets, traveling minstrels, or the condemned themselves, whispering final words, that became legend before the rope snapped tight. Lean closer to the scaffold's splintered rail and imagine the hush that fell when a pirate queen stepped forward, skirts muddied from the march through cobbled streets, her hair hidden beneath a ragged hood. Some stories claim these women spoke curses through gritted teeth, vowing storms would swamp royal fleets. Others say they smiled, turning their last breath into a promise that freedom could never be hanged so easily. Afterward, the songs did their work. They drifted from gallows to taverns, folded into verses that rattled against pewter mugs and danced on greasy planks. A fiddler's bow scratched out a tune as sailors tapped their boots in time, lifting their cups to pirate queens, who by candlelight transformed from criminals into martyrs for those too poor or too wild to fit inside the king's neat laws. One overlooked detail: some ballads carried hidden meanings. A certain word swapped in for another, a line that seemed like nonsense unless you knew which ship it named, which captain's route it mapped in riddles. In some coastal towns, humming the wrong verse could earn you a knock on the door from the constable, proof enough that music kept rebellion alive long after the scaffold planks rotted away. Scholars who chase these songs through yellowed broadsides and fragile manuscripts find contradictions at every verse. One version of a gallows song calls a pirate queen the terror of merchant ships. Another crowns her a savior of fisherfolk cheated by greedy governors. Somewhere in the middle lies the truth, if it hasn't already slipped through gaps in the melody. Inside a candlelit tavern, a singer leans over his lute voice soft enough to keep even the drunkest sailor leaning close. He draws out the tale of a woman who laughed when the noose slipped over her throat, who promised the sea would carry her secrets far from the gallows yard and bury them beneath breakers no king's ship could reach. The crowd hums along each voice, stitching another layer onto the legend, so that by the time the last note fades, no one truly remembers how she died, only that she did so in a way worth singing. A peculiar rumor clings to these gallows songs. Some say that in the dead of night, when the tavern lamps gutter and the ales run thin, you can still hear the faintest echo of a pirate's promise hidden in the final refrain. An oath that her bones won't lie quiet, that her secrets still drift through foggy bays on nights when the tide's high and the wind howls just so. Outside, the street cobbles glisten with rain as the tavern empties, voices trailing the song out into the night. A sailor hums a bar or two beneath his breath, boots splashing through puddles as he imagines the pirate queen's ghost keeping watch from a masthead or the shadows behind a warehouse door. Historians puzzle over how many of these verses are truth or wishful dreaming. Yet no scholar's quill can fully silence a song once it slips between ale mugs and the hush of closing doors. Like the sea itself, these ballads rise again, with each new telling tangled in salt wind and midnight laughter. And when the gallows stand empty, when the ropes rot and the scaffold sags beneath moss and rain, the songs linger, soft reminders that freedom doesn't always die when the last plank creaks. Sometimes it sails on in verses carried far beyond any king's reach. Ahead, the trail drifts into disguises and second lives, where rumor insists some women escape the hangman's knot altogether, stepping into new names that slip past the watchful eyes of kings and clerks alike. Slip away from the gallows shadow now, and follow a rumor down a twisting alley into the hush of back rooms and wind-battered cottages where the story shifts once again. Here, between the last verse of a tavern ballad and the hush of dawn, Whispers claim some pirate queens never swung from a rope at all. Instead, they vanished, faked deaths, bribed jailers, or swapped places with other condemned souls, whose names no one bothered to remember once the noose had done its work. Picture this: a crowded dockside at sunrise, the air sharp with salt, and the stink of fish stalls just opening for the day. A cart rattles past its cargo, hidden beneath rotting nets and half-salted cod. Beneath that tangle, maybe a woman crouches hair-chopped to the jaw trousers borrowed from a boy too drunk to notice the theft. By the time the cart rolls beyond the harbor's edge, she's no longer Anne Mary or Ching. She's someone else, some no-name widow midwife or innkeeper's cousin who appears in parish books, just as the pirate disappears from the court's tidy ledgers. One overlooked fact: some records hint at sudden new names cropping up in coastal villages days after an execution was said to have taken place. A midwife who knew too much about rope burns. A tavern mistress whose savings were suspiciously flush. Scholars still argue whether these second lives are mere coincidence, villagers spinning tales by candlelight, or scraps of truth half buried beneath centuries of mossy gravestones and yellowed receipts for rum and barley. Inside a lamplit room, you might glimpse this new life taking shape. A woman sits at a scrubbed wooden table ink pot, balanced beside a ledger for the tavern's ale deliveries. She hums softly an old sea shanty, though no patron notices the tune for what it is. If a sailor recognizes her eyes, they know better than to say it aloud. Loose lips, after all, once paid for her pistol, and the fast sloop she abandoned for this quiet disguise. A peculiar rumor clings to some parish records, half-faded baptism entries for children who appeared after a pirate's execution. Some say these were the pirates' own smuggled from island to island under borrowed names, until they could inherit enough rumor to become legends themselves. Local families, even generations later, still whisper that great-grandmother's brooch once belonged to a pirate queen who slept under the same thatched roof. Historians remain puzzled by the gaps in these stories' wills that appear too tidy property deeds with ink that never quite matches the rest of the page. A signature at the bottom that looks suspiciously like a name struck from a gallows list decades before. Some academics scoff, calling it all romantic nonsense. Others squint at the ledgers and see not fable, but the outline of rebellion wearing an apron and pouring ale in a backwater port town. Imagine the hush of an early morning market where a woman wrapped in shawls trades fish for grain. She smiles politely, speaks little, yet slips a silver coin into a young sailor's palm payment for a message carried down the coast to someone waiting under a false flag. No pistols drawn, no cannons fired, just secrets passed hand to hand like bread at a parish fair. One curious detail: it said some of these women left behind coded diaries, pages tucked into the rafters or hidden under hearthstones, where only trusted kin might find them. Inside a map, sketched beside a recipe for pickled herring. A ship's name buried in the margin of a prayer. Whether these diaries ever truly guided treasure hunters is anyone's guess. Many who went looking returned with nothing but sand in their boots and salt burns on their lips. By the glow of a single lantern, you see how the old pirate's defiance flickers on in the wink of a midwife who knows when to hold her tongue, in the sly grin of a tavern keeper who waters the ale just enough to make loose talk easier to catch. Each new identity is another rigging tied to the ghost of a ship that never truly sank. Outside, wind rattles shutters against the dawn. Somewhere beyond the headlands, a fishing boat drifts into harbor, its crew, unaware that the woman tending the fire at the dockside inn once commanded 10 times as many souls at sea. A ship's bell tolls in the distance echoes of cannon fire and laughter carried on the tide. Scholars argue still, were these second lives real, or just bedtime tales spun for sailors half dreaming of storms and plunder? There's no scholarly consensus, of course, just soft footprints in parish dust and whispered lines in parish books, clues that the ocean never fully gives back what it takes. Ahead waits the last drift of this tale bottles that carry secrets over waves, messages smuggled through rum and tide for crews who might yet follow where the pirate queens led. Step out from the hidden corners of village inns and follow the wind to the shore again, this time to the hush of a midnight beach, where waves slip in and out like secrets being whispered between the sand and the dark. Here, rumor claims pirate queens left more than second lives behind. They left tales sealed in bottles bobbing over black waves carrying warnings or promises for crews bold enough to believe. Picture the scene, the hush of the tide, the hush of breath held tight as a woman crouches at the water's edge. In her hands, a green glass bottle still slick from the rum it once held. Inside, a scrap of parchment curls around itself, ink smudged by salt air, but words still sharp enough to cut a deal long after the sender's bones lie hidden under dune grass or under another woman's name. One overlooked fact: these bottled messages were more than bedtime legends for sailors nursing hangovers in dawn-lit taverns. A few have actually washed ashore centuries later, barnacle-clung relics cracked open by curious hands. Some held nothing but a curse, a line or two promising storms and shipwrecks for any Navy man daring enough to hunt down the writer's old crew. Others held crude maps lines so faint historians still argue whether they were real or the wishful doodles of lonely exiles. Imagine the hush on deck when a bottle clinks against a hull in the gray wash of dawn. A deckhand half asleep fishes it from the seaweed tangling around the rudder. He cracks the wax with calloused fingers, unrolls the parchment, and squints at names he doesn't dare repeat to the quartermaster. A warning, a hoax, or a promise of hidden spoils still waiting where coral fingers clutch the sand tight. Some captains swore these drifting messages were how pirate queens kept their ghost fleets alive, clues left for loyalists to find each other in secret coves when the noose or the pardon drove them underground. Whether these claims were truth or drunk talk slurred over cheap gin scholars still debate. Surviving logs from merchant brigs and Navy cutters mention sightings, corked bottles, bobbing like pale ghosts in moonlit channels, sometimes snagged in nets, sometimes smashed against jagged shoals where no man dares drop anchor. A peculiar rumor still circles old sea towns, that one bottle still floats somewhere in the warm currents off the Indies, carrying the last testament of a pirate queen who promised vengeance from beyond the grave. Some say the bottle holds coordinates to a hidden island. Others swear it's nothing but a curse. May storms chase you. May chains fail. You may the sea take what kings never could. No one has ever proved, which it is only, that fishermen still swap the story whenever tides run high and the wind rattles shutters all night. Historians sifting through shipwreck ledgers find hints, tiny notations about bottled warnings stashed in the margins beside lists of sea's spices and casks of salt pork. These scribbles rarely match the tidy lines of official reports. Instead, they read like nervous afterthoughts. Crew found a bottle near shoals. Burned message before the men talked. No signature. No proof it was ever real. Yet the stories slip through the gaps like seawater through rotten planks. Picture the bottle adrift now, dark glass rolling over swell and trough moonlight, glancing off its shoulder as it drifts further from the coast that tried to claim its sender. Somewhere, maybe it brushes the keel of a fishing sloop. Maybe it slips into a mangrove channel where no customs man dares search too closely. Maybe it sinks for good settling beside coral, where small, bright fish read its lines like gospel long after the language turns to salt stains. One curious detail, some say, the practice of smuggling messages in bottles outlasted the pirate queens who perfected it. Naval spies, smugglers, even rebel leaders borrowed the trick-hiding orders and pay lists in corked flasks tossed from riverbanks to be scooped up by trusted hands waiting downstream. Each bottle a tiny gamble, its path shaped by tide and wind, and the luck of hands strong enough to uncork it before the crown's men did. So if you stand barefoot in the surf tonight, listen. The hush between the waves might carry the faint rattle of glass tapping against barnacled rocks. A warning, a promise, or just another ghost of salt and ink drifting far beyond the reach of kings and courts. Next, these drifting tales carry us to those who might carry the pirate legacy without even knowing it. The children of the tide whispered about in fishing villages and seaside cottages, where rumor says the pirate queen's blood still calls to hidden treasure and secrets deeper than any sea. Let the tide tug you from the hush of bottle whispers toward the doorsteps of weather-beaten cottages and creaking docks, where rumor says the pirate queen's legacies live on, not just in sea songs or drifting parchment, but in flesh and blood. They call them the children of the tide sons and daughters, who, if gossip is to be believed, carry bits of salt and rebellion in their veins, tucked among old family tales that linger like sea spray on wind-battered shutters. Picture a coastal village at dawn, gray light spilling over nets hung to dry beside neat garden plots, where cabbage and salted fish keep families fed through lean seasons. A child sits on a crumbling stone wall, swinging muddy boots, while an old uncle mutters half-truths over a pipe. Your grandmother girl, she wasn't always mending nets and gutting cod. She sailed once, sailed further than any man in this harbor ever dared. One overlooked fact, a handful of parish records do hint at these children. Names scribbled in the margins, fathers unknown, or listed as lost at sea, a tidy phrase that might mean pirate deserter or something altogether more convenient when questions became dangerous to answer. Historians lean close over these cracked pages, squinting at water stains and wondering which scribble hides a pirate's bloodline dressed up as a respectable fisherman's heir. Step into one of those tiny salt box cottages now. The air smells of brine and old stew, bubbling over a driftwood fire. On the mantel sits a battered chest, no bigger than a bread box. Its lock rusted shut, its hinges creaking when a child dares pry it open. Inside, maybe just moth-eaten blankets, or maybe tucked beneath linen and old tax receipts, a tarnished coin marked with a crest no honest trader ever stamped. A token from a mother who never told all her secrets. A curious rumor drifts among village midwives and old sailors who swear they know the signs. They say you can spot the tide's children by the way they stare too long at the horizon, how they slip away at dusk to sit on breakwaters and listen for ships that never come. Some claim these sons and daughters inherit more than stories. They inherit maps only they can read routes to hidden caches buried when the rope grew too close and the sea offered its hush instead of the gallows. One old folk tale insists a boy once found his grandmother's ring buried in the sand after a storm tore up half the dunes. Scratched inside were initials matching a pirate queen, whose trial records end in a neat hanged, but whose grave was never found. Did the boy dig up treasure? No one agrees. Some say he slipped away. At 16, vanished aboard a coastal trader bound for warmer waters. Others say he died an old man in that same cottage, his pockets empty, but his hearth cluttered with driftwood that smelled faintly of salt and lost storms. Historians remain divided. Of course they do, over whether any of these children carried forward anything but stories. Some argue the bloodline claims were gossip spun by families hungry to claim a scrap of outlaw glory. Others point to property deeds bought with suspicious coin fishing boats paid for in hard silver, when the herring trade alone wouldn't cover the cost of a single plank. A peculiar detail: in some villages, the oldest families still hold quiet gatherings at dusk on the spring tide. They claim its tradition nothing more than prayers for safe nets and calm seas. But among the flickering lanterns and the hush of waves lapping pilings, a few sharp ears swear they hear old names spoken whispered like a promise that the tide's children know exactly where the salt-buried secrets lie. Step back now. Feel the hush settle as the lanterns go out one by one. The child on the stone wall kicks at an old oyster shell, sending it skittering into the tall grass where sand fleas hide until the next high tide. In that simple flick of a foot lies the echo of a boot thudding across a stolen deck, a captain's barked orders lost to cannon smoke and the hungry hush of the ocean. Outside, the cottage gulls wheel overhead, their cries sharp enough to make you wonder who else listens when these children dream of storms. Maybe there's truth in the hush between the breakers, a promise that some legacies outlive the noose, the pardon, even the shifting dunes that bury crooked gravestones. Some say these children carry the tide itself under their skin, restless, salt-bitter loyal, only to secrets the sea keeps long after parchment fades. And beyond this, hush stories twist again, turning these children into folklore's favorite ghosts, pirate queens in memory and myth, who keep drifting through village plays and whispered warnings when the fog rolls heavy off the bay. Step softly now into the final hush, where salt air slips through cottage shutters and smoke from an old hearth drifts out to mingle with sea fog rolling up the dunes. Here in the spaces where record books fall silent, the children of the tide swell into something larger than flesh and bone folklore. Stories that never quite die, but drift from lips to candle flame, shaping pirate queens into something half true, half dream. Picture a coastal village where winter comes early. The wind rattles windows, and inside a low-beamed hall, villagers gather grandmothers with shawls, pulled tight boys half asleep on their father's knees, fishermen smelling of salt and brine. At the front, a single oil lamp flickers beside a makeshift stage of crates and old nets. Tonight's tale isn't written in a book. It slips from an old man's throat like a tide rolling in slow, unstoppable. He speaks of rebel captains who rode out storms no navy dared follow, who sank their gold deep where only the moonlight knows the path. He names Anne Bonny, Ching, Shih, Mary Reed, yet he folds them into other names, older ones passed down when the Crown's patrols still prowled these waters with sharp eyes and sharper blades. Some stories claim these pirate queens did more than command ships. They cursed winds' tamed squalls, spoke to the sea as if it were a lover too wild to be chained. One curious fact: across fishing hamlets and island villages, these stories still shape little rituals. A bit of rum poured into the surf When a storm rolls close, a candle left flickering by a windowsill for a ship that never came home. Historians hunting for proof find old church ledgers scribbled with half-legible lines about forbidden sea plays, folk performances that retold pirate ballads on candlelit stages, half scandal, half celebration. Lean closer to the fire's crackle, and you might catch the tale of a village that claims to hold the skull of a pirate queen hidden beneath its chapel floor. Proof, they say, that she died a saint in the eyes of her people, no matter what the king's men wrote in neat lines on a court record. Some believe her ghost keeps watch rattling windows on nights when the Navy's sails appear too near the bay. A peculiar rumor flickers through these plays that if you speak a pirate queen's name aloud on a moonless night, the wind will carry your wish, fortune for the bold, safe passage, for the desperate vengeance for the betrayed. Whether anyone truly believes this, or simply finds comfort in the hush of an old legend whispered over fish stew and cider, no scholar can say for certain. Picture a summer festival by the dunes. Lanterns bob on sticks, paper stars spin in salty breezes, while barefoot children chase each other through tangled grass. At dusk, local players dress in scraps of old sailcloth tricorn hats, borrowed from someone's attic shawls, pinned tight like a captain's cloak. They act out raids and storms, courtroom dramas, and daring escapes. When the final act comes, a noose or a pardon, someone always slips a line that breaks the tale open. Maybe she didn't die. Maybe she waits out there still just beyond the last wave. It's easy to laugh at such superstition. Historians do, even as they scribble in their notebooks the dates of these plays, the odd detail of a wooden sword passed from one festival to the next. They frown at mismatched dates, contradictory lines, yet they lean in closer all the same when a fisherman swears his great-great-grandmother's lullaby once hit a map no king ever found. Somewhere, in a low-roofed cottage or a harbor tavern, where the floors still creak like the deck of an old sloop, an elder hums a verse that drifts from mouth to mouth long after the oil lamp sputters out. Maybe it's nothing, just another bedtime story for a child who asks why the wind wails louder some nights than others. Or maybe it's something more, a signal, a keepsake of salt and rebellion clinging to families who remember. Step outside when the festival lanterns go dark and listen. Between the waves, slapping the dock pilings, and the gulls shrieking at the wind's edge, you might hear it too. A ghost's promise that legends don't sleep just because the crown's ledgers say they should. Next slip one last time into the hush of fog and dark water, where sailors swear these pirate queens never left at all, but drift as warnings and wraiths on the waves, keeping watch over secrets no tide will ever wash away. Step with care into this final hush, where salt mist coils low over moonlit bays, and the tide's slow heartbeat hums against barnacled piers. Here where folklore frays into something stranger, still the pirate queens don't rest easy beneath stones or drift only through tavern songs. They rise again in ghost tales. Sailors trade like coins, half daring the sea to prove them true. Picture a lone fishing boat slipping through fog so thick it swallows lantern light whole. A deckhand stands watch at the bow, breath fogging in the chill as he scans the shifting dark for hidden shoals. His grandfather's voice echoes in his mind. Keep your eyes sharp, lad. Not just for rocks or royal cutters, but for her. The one they say drifts out here, still white sails, on a ship no masthead ever flew. One overlooked fact: coastal logs tucked in the margins of old shipping ledgers record curious sightings, faint shapes slipping between fishing fleets, sails full against windless air hulls that vanish when chased. Some logs dismiss them as mirages born of fatigue and too much rum. Others scribble hasty notations about ghost crews, women in tattered coats, barking orders on decks slick with sea mist. Stand near the bow, now, and imagine it for yourself, the sudden hush of the waves, the way your pulse stutters when a shadow looms just beyond the reach of your lantern. A ragged figure stands at the rail of a phantom brig face, hidden beneath a battered tricorn hair, streaming like black flags in the wind. Some say these spirits appear when storms brew close, a warning to any fool who'd hunt down secrets the sea would rather keep. A peculiar rumor clings to one rocky inlet. Villagers swear that on fog-heavy nights, if you listen past the crash of breakers, you'll hear laughter carried on the wind. Some swear it's just the gulls, but others claim it's the ghost of a pirate queen, mocking any Navy patrol bold enough to creep this far from port. Historians brush these tales aside with polite smiles. What's a phantom ship but a sailor's excuse for an empty net and lost hours? And yet some curious scribes chase every scrap of evidence, yellowed letters describing crews who vanished with cargo holds full only to wash ashore weeks later with stories of ghostly sails slipping through fog like knives. Each tale conflicts. Of course, one calls her a wraith who drags Navy ships to ruin. Another paints her as a guardian spirit, steering lone fishermen clear of hidden reefs. Picture a tavern near the docks where nets dry and salt clings to floorboards. A sailor sits hunched near the hearth voice, raw from too much cold wind and cheap gin. He swears he saw her, a face pale as moonlight, eyes like a storm leaning over the gunwale of a ship that made no sound as it passed. His friends laugh, buy him another drink, but listen just the same. Because when the sea moans outside the shutters, even skeptics feel the hair rise at the back of their necks. One curious detail, some old maps show tiny scribbles, crosses and cryptic notes like "Beware her watch" or "Ghost tide here." Nobody agrees whether these marks warn of reefs or something older, something alive, in salt air and old iron chains that never quite rust away. If you stand on the headland, when the wind howls and the fog creeps in thick as fleece, you might glimpse it too, a flicker of a mast where no mast should be, sails trembling in moonlight that slithers between torn clouds. Maybe it's a trick of the eye. Maybe it's the pirate queen herself, still stalking the waves to guard secrets her grave could never hold. Scholars continue to bicker. Some claim these tales keep coastal villages alive in lean years, drawing in curious visitors, hoping to glimpse a ghost in the spray. Others argue the stories endure because they echo something real, a warning that power claimed by force or crown can't anchor a spirit that once tasted freedom on the open tide. So hush now, listen, as the waves slap gently against the dock posts. Somewhere far offshore, a phantom sail shifts like a whispered promise, reminding you that some secrets never drown, that some legends slip every noose, every verdict, every crown's decree. Long after ropes fray and pardons yellow in dusty archives, these pirate queens drift on warnings, and guardians cautionary tales and quiet revenge all at once. Yet secrets seldom drift alone. At sea, they slip ashore, hide in the clatter of hammers, and wake again where salt meets iron under cover of dawn. You stand in the cold dawn, the fog wrapping around your shoulders like an old sail. A row of narrow sheds hides behind a broken fence. They smell of wet rope pitch and sawdust. You're not alone. Somewhere in the shadows, a figure moves skirts, tucked up under rough trousers, hair tucked away beneath a battered cap. By first light, she's hammering nails into the ribs of a half-built sloop. In these early hours, the dockyard is a hush of secrets. A hammer taps out an irregular code, one long knock, two quick ones. Some say these were signals between the women who worked here unseen, passing warnings about who might be watching. Historians still argue whether these coded knocks really existed or are just the stuff of dockside gossip. You drift closer, careful not to slip on the slick boards. Somewhere in the mist, another figure, this one older. A widow perhaps leans over a ledger by lantern light. Her hand scribbles out a name, replaces it with another. Fake names for real ships. Some of those ships will carry saltfish and barrels of nails. Some might carry letters meant for pirate captains waiting just beyond the mouth of the river. Your foot bumps a stray nail. You pick it up. It's cold, still sticky with tar. The smell is strong enough to sting your nose. Nearby, a rough plank leans against a half-barrel. Scratched into its underside is a faint mark, a curve, a cross, maybe just a careless cut, maybe a signature that no official record will ever show. Researchers still can't agree if these hidden marks were prideful signs or secret warnings to future eyes. Listen. Another sound, under the hammering a hush of voices. The women talk softly, leaning close, so the shipyard foreman won't hear. Some are widows, finishing what their husbands started before being called to war. Others are daughters who learned to bend wood long before they learned to read. Some work here for coins, others for the sheer right to shape something that floats. Past the sheds, a small river curls toward the sea. Boats slip out at night, some fully built, some barely ready, hidden under tarps, until the tide is high enough. Royal inspectors do come by now and then, but they leave lighter in the pockets than they arrived. Bribes don't always come in coins. Sometimes it's salted fish, sometimes barrels of nails or a new plank for a guard's own leaking roof. The sky brightens, the dockyard shifts, the hammering stops. The disguised shipwrights slip away before the town wakes. They leave behind the smell of tar, a few scattered shavings, a promise nailed into the keel that no royal eye will ever read. Scholars keep searching for these yards, for the names of the women who made them run. Old letters surface hints here and there, diaries full of half-told truths, pages missing ink smeared by damp river air. Some say the truth went out with the tide and never came back. You stand very still as the dawn fully breaks. Somewhere behind you, a tavern door swings open to welcome those same women who just vanished into the waking day. They'll drink tea in public like nothing happened. At night, they'll hammer and plan again under flickering lanterns and the watchful eyes of no one at all. The river glides on the slipways, empty once more until tomorrow's mist hides the next secret launch. A low fog curls around your ankles as you step deeper into the yard's hidden heart. The air is damp with the scent of river mud and old timber, and each footstep lands soft on a ground littered with wood shavings. Past the first sheds, you find yourself staring at something unexpected, a small frame of a ship, halfway done its skeleton, rising like a rib cage against the pale dawn. Here under the cover of early light, widows and daughters bend over planks, their fingers raw, and tar-blackened coaxing wood to curve where it shouldn't. They work in pairs, one steadying the timber, the other driving nails with quick, practiced taps. You listen to the steady rhythm, and if you close your eyes, you might imagine it's the lullaby of the yard, tap, tap, hush, tap, tap. The sound weaves through the fog, a secret song passed from mother to daughter. Some believe these patterns meant more than just work. Historians still wonder if hidden meanings lingered in the cadence, a code whispered in wood and iron. One woman pauses to rub a smear of pitch from her cheek. Her sleeves are rolled up, revealing a line of small scars, tiny reminders that shipbuilding spares no one's soft hands. She glances your way as if to dare you to question her place here. If you asked, she might tell you she started in this yard as a child fetching nails for her father before he marched off to war. When he didn't come back, she stayed. The yard needed hands. She had two. Closer to the water, another figure crouches near a keel propped high on blocks. She runs a finger along a groove carved deep beneath where the planks will hide it forever. Some say these hidden marks were tokens, a woman's initials, a message to those who knew where to look. Maybe a mark of defiance, maybe just a sign she was there. Scholars still debate if these signs were warnings for future generations or simple acts of pride that would never see the sun. A gull cries overhead, a reminder that the day will break fully soon. You imagine the townsfolk stirring in their cottages, none the wiser that the new fishing boat they'll see on the river tonight was shaped by hands they'd never suspect. Some shipwright families pass these secrets through generations. A daughter learns how to set ribs true and tight, how to heat tar without burning it, how to speak softly when men in uniforms arrive, asking too many questions. Some stories tell of fathers who pretended a daughter was a nephew. Hair-shorn short voices dropped, low eyes kept down when inspectors came by. Some girls learned to spit and swear, to walk with wide shoulders and stay out of the tavern's back rooms when deals were cut. Some didn't bother pretending at all, they just worked trusted that dawn would hide what dusk revealed. Drift your gaze to the far side of the yard. A battered shed leans so far, you'd think a strong wind might knock it down. Inside, you'd find tools, older than any living soul here adds draw knives, augers handed down hidden behind false panels and kitchen walls when tacksmen came knocking. Some of these tools have carved the same shape for centuries, hidden in plain sight. Researchers still comb through old deeds and diaries, hunting for any scrap that proves these tools were women's legacy, not just borrowed from men. The hammering quiets for a moment, replaced by soft voices, trading news of river tides, the price of pitch, the gossip of who bribed whom this week to look the other way. You catch a snatch of laughter, a joke whispered between planks, about a royal inspector who left with a new skiff for his mistress instead of an official report for his king. Records remain suspiciously thin on who really signed off on such trades. A plank creaks behind you. You turn to see a girl barely 12 arms full of nail skirts hitched up and bare feet black with tar and splinters. She stares at you a moment, half proud, half wary, before disappearing into the ribs of the half-built sloop. Her footsteps echo soft as the mist closes behind her. If you listen close, you'll hear the river slap against the slipway. It's a promise that tonight this boat might slide into black water with no fanfare, no registry, no name carved on its side. It'll join the countless others that slipped away unseen, carrying secrets downriver where no record keeper waits. A soft breeze curls past your face, bringing with it the low murmur of voices, blending with the dawn chorus of gulls. Somewhere deeper in the yard, a woman lights a lantern for the next shift, its glow flickering against the damp boards, like a promise that the work will never truly stop, only hide weight and whisper itself forward to the next willing hand. The first warm rays of sunlight begin to burn through the mist, revealing more of the dockyard's secrets. As the fog lifts, You spot a narrow path leading away from the slipways, winding between stacks of rough-hewn planks and barrels of tar. You follow it quietly, the soft crunch of sawdust underfoot, the only sign you're here at all. Ahead, tucked behind a leaning fence and half swallowed by ivy, sits a crooked shed where whispers and hidden plans come alive. Inside this small shack, two figures sit cross-legged on upturned crates, a roll of parchment spread between them. The lantern flickers, throwing long shadows on the rough walls. They lean close, heads nearly touching as they trace lines with ink-darkened fingertips, lines that, if read correctly, would show a faster hull, a sharper keel, a ship that could outrun any tax collector's sloop or royal frigate. Some say these plans were smuggled from yard to yard, copied in secret, then passed hand to hand down the muddy banks of the river. Historians still argue whether these designs ever reach pirates waiting offshore, or if it's just another tavern tale told to explain how so many ships vanished into fog. A soft cough interrupts your thoughts. At the back of the shed, an older woman counts nails into small cloth pouches, tiny gifts for the next builder down the line. She ties each pouch tight, tucks them into a battered leather satchel, and wipes her hands on her apron, leaving behind black smudges that never quite wash away. She catches your eye and shrugs as if to say, "What else would you have me do?" When husbands and sons vanish into wars, and waves, someone has to finish what they started. Your gaze drifts to the parchment again. Tiny marks along the edge catch your attention, strange notations in a shaky hand. Some scholars believe these side scribbles were secret codes, instructions for who to bribe, which inspector to watch, which beacon fires to light or extinguish to fool the royal patrols. But of course, the records are always incomplete, burned, soaked, lost, when someone decided the sea should keep its secrets. You slip back, outside the hush of the yard, folding around you once more. Beyond the shed, a small rowboat bobs gently at the dock's edge. A figure crouches beside it, packing wrapped bundles beneath a tarp. The bundles are flat and heavy, more parchment, a stack of ledgers with false names, or maybe just salted fish, bound for the next town, as cover for something far more dangerous. Some claim entire crates of plans were hidden beneath baskets of fish, carried downriver under the noses of guards, too busy counting barrels of herring to notice the ink stains on the boatman's sleeves. A shout echoes across the yard, soft but urgent. The crouched figure stands, face hidden beneath a pulled-down cap. A moment later, she melts into the shadows of a nearby warehouse, the rowboat drifting away with only a faint ripple to show it was ever there. You wonder how many of these small trades and secret launches happened before dawn, the river carrying quiet rebellion out to sea. Closer to the main slipway, a group gathers around a fresh hull. This one is nearly done, planks tight tar, sealing every seam. The women stand in a loose circle, voices low. One runs her hand along the keel fingers, pausing over a shallow notch near the stern, a Mark A signature, or just a slip of the adze. Researchers continue to debate whether these faint carvings were accidental or intentional signs that a woman's hands shaped what history tried to hide. A sudden gust rattles the loose boards of a nearby shed, sending a flurry of wood shavings across your boots. One of the women laughs, brushing sawdust from her hair. For a moment, the yard feels lighter, less like a secret, and more like any other place where work must be done, dawn to dusk, with jokes and tired shoulders and calloused palms. Then the laughter hushes as a figure appears at the yard's edge, a man in a long coat, papers tucked beneath his arm, eyes sharp beneath the brim of his hat. The group stiffens, steps subtly closer together. The inspector's eyes flick from face to face, linger on a stray wisp of hair escaping from beneath a cap, then drift away again. He glances at the new hole runs, a gloved finger along the seam, as if testing for flaws. No words pass, just a nod, a flick of coins into a waiting hand, and the man disappears back up the path. Some say these bribes were enough to buy silence for years. Others whisper that for every official paid off another was waiting to sell secrets back to the crown. The circle breaks. The hammering resumes quiet but steady. The hull will be finished by nightfall, rolled into the river under cover of darkness, its name written in one ledger, its real owner in another, and somewhere, maybe out at sea, a pirate captain waits for a ship he never officially ordered. You stand still as the first true rays of sunlight break across the yard, the river glinting like spilled silver. Another day begins for the town beyond the fence, unaware of the secrets nailed deep into these hidden frames. A hush settles over the yard as the morning sun fully takes hold, banishing the last strips of mist that once wrapped every secret tight. Now, the wood stacks stand clear, the planks gleam slick with tar, and the river sparkles like it's never hidden a thing in its cold currents. But you know better. Beneath that bright surface, plans still drift unseen, passed from one careful hand to the next, in ways no ledger will ever admit. You follow the worn path that curls behind the main slipway, where a low stone wall hides a cluster of barrels and crates stacked almost too neatly. It's here behind these piles that small trades happen when no one's looking. A figure sits on a crate's edge, boots dangling just above the ground. She's young, maybe 16, but the sharp look in her eyes could match any master shipwright's. On her lap rests a folded cloth corners stained with ink and oil. When she unwraps it, you see a small roll of parchment covered in lines, arrows, and tiny notations. She works fast, dipping a stick into a pot of pitch and tracing over the faint lines, darkening them so they won't vanish in damp air. These are ship plans, leaner hulls, sharper bows, rigging angles meant to outrun anything flying a royal flag. Rumor has it, yards like these didn't just build for honest merchants or loyal subjects. Some of these plans slipped from here to pirate dens smuggled under layers of salted cod or barrels of nails. Some historians still claim these yards built half the fast schooners that raided royal convoys when no one was watching. A small cat slips past your ankles, tail flicking against your boot. It stops beside the girl, purrs low as she pauses to scratch its ears. She mutters something about luck, because every builder here knows a dockyard cat is good fortune, keeps rats away from the pitch barrels, and ears open for unwanted footsteps. She rolls up the parchment again, ties it tight with a strip of cloth, then hides it inside a hollow plank stacked with the others. If you didn't see her do it, you'd never guess a single secret lay hidden there. Beyond the barrels, you hear a faint splash, a soft rhythm of oars dipping into the river's calm skin. You edge closer, peeking through a gap in the wall. A small boat drifts away from the dock, rowed by a broad-shouldered figure, bundled in a coat far too large for the slight frame beneath. The hat pulled low hides her face, but you can just make out the curve of a braid tucked beneath the collar. Some say women like her ferried messages between hidden yards, braving river fog and patrol boats for a handful of coins and the thrill of fooling a king's men. The boat slips into a bend in the river, vanishing behind reeds and drifting branches. All that's left is a ripple that breaks the sunlight for a moment, then smooths out as if nothing happened at all. You straighten up, brushing a splinter from your sleeve, and wander toward a low tavern squatting near the yard's edge. It looks abandoned by daylight shutters, half-hinged, door hanging crooked. But push that door open at dusk, they say, and you'd find the real trade happening far from the slipways, quiet deals over tankards of dark ale, hushed promises exchanged for coin or secrets. Some nights, shipwrights met pirates here sketching hole shapes onto greasy tabletops, wiping them clean before dawn. Surviving diaries mention such meetings only in hints, a name half blotted by spilled wine, a bill for salt fish suspiciously large for a tavern that sold no fish. Inside, the smell of stale drink and river mud clings to warped floorboards. You spot a scuff mark on a beam, a deep gouge like someone hid something, once pried it loose when the wrong eyes came looking. Some claim entire contracts were hidden in plain sight, nailed under tabletops, sewn into apron hems tucked inside barrels marked for ale, but filled with ink and parchment instead. Outside again, the yard hums with life. A hammer strikes a stubborn plank. A rasp scrapes down a beam. You see a mother show her daughter how to check the curve of a rib by eye alone, no ruler, just instinct honed by years of bending wood against its own will. They lean together, heads closed, their voices lost beneath the calls of gulls overhead. And in this moment, you understand what made these secret yards thrive. It wasn't just clever bribes or hidden plans. It was the passing down mothers, teaching daughters, sisters, teaching sisters, secrets nailed into planks, and stories whispered by lantern light. Historians may debate who carved what, who paid whom, but they agree on one thing. These ships didn't build themselves. You stand at the fence once more, looking back at the slipways, the stacks of planks, the tar pots bubbling like black mirrors. Somewhere in those shadows waits another dawn, another launch under a false name, another woman's hand, shaping a vessel that will carry a piece of her far beyond these muddy banks. If you wander a little further from the main slipways, you'll find yourself standing at the edge of a narrow path that snakes through reeds taller than your head. The river hums close by, carrying the faint echo of hammer taps and whispered deals. Here, the dockyard secrets bleed into the marshland half-wild ground where no inspector's boots stay clean for long. Some say this is where the cleverest builders slipped away, when watchful eyes came calling into the reeds, into the fog, into boats that vanished without so much as a name etched on the prow. Step carefully beneath the tangled green scraps of old rope, and half-buried tools catch the morning light like tiny clues. You pause to nudge a rusted chisel with your boot. It shifts the mud, revealing the corner of a small wooden box, edges softened by years of damp earth. If you cracked it open, you'd find scraps of parchment, curled like sleeping mice fragments of measurements, half-finished hull shapes, maybe even a name meant to fool an inspector or two. Scholars still bicker over how many hidden caches like this remain, tucked under floorboards, buried under sheds, forgotten under kitchen stones, where no taxman ever thought to pry. Further down the path, you hear voices, low urgent, just a ripple against the rustle of reeds. You edge closer until you see them, three figures hunched around a small makeshift table made from a plank laid across two barrels. A single lantern flickers the flame fighting the breeze. On the table lies an oilcloth stretched tight, its corners weighed down by stones. Under the cloth, a map of the river scribbled with tiny arrows, crude marks for beacon fires, and sandbars coated dots that only the right eyes can read. One woman jabs a finger at a bend in the river, drawn in smudged ink. She talks fast, explaining how a false beacon might burn tonight, fooling a royal patrol into thinking a ship slipped west instead of east. Her partner nods pencil, flying across another scrap, scribbling fake names. Duplicate registries, paper ghosts, to cover wooden ones. Some rumors claim these beacon tricks were old as river trade itself borrowed from smugglers and passed down until they became as natural as the tide. Historians argue if these tales are just marsh gossip, but the stories stick all the same. You lean closer, catching bits of their plan. A boat will drift out at high tide, its hull tarred black sails furled low. On paper, it's a barge bound for a royal port, carrying barrels of salt fish. In truth, it'll trade that salt fish for coin with a pirate sloop, waiting beyond the mouth of the estuary. By the time any official ledger catches up, the boat will have a new name, a fresh coat of paint, and a crew that never learned to curtsy to a crown. The lantern flickers out. A soft scrape as the oilcloth rolls up the map, disappearing into a battered leather satchel. A nod passes between them, a silent promise that the river will keep its secrets one more night. They fade into the reeds, footsteps muffled by thick moss and soft mud. You stay a moment longer, listening to the hush of water against the bank. Nearby, the ghost of an old slipway juts into the river, a half-rotted dock, planks missing rusted nails bent sideways like crooked teeth. Some claim this dock once launched ships under names never spoken aloud. Some say, if you come here at low tide, you'll find bits of iron bolts, stray timbers with hidden marks, small evidence of hands that history forgot. Researchers still hunt the marsh's diaries in hand, hoping to find a single clear ledger that might settle centuries of rumor. So far, the river has outwitted them all. A breeze picks up, stirring the reeds around you like whispered conversation. Somewhere back at the main yard, hammers ring again, steady patient, each blow a quiet rebellion. Here in the marsh, it's all soft secrets, half-finished maps, and promises carried by water. The tide creeps higher, lapping at the old slipway's legs. In a few hours, all that remains will sink under river silt, until someone else comes poking around with questions. Before you turn back, you crouch at the edge of the broken dock. The water reflects the sky, a smear of soft blue and drifting white. Somewhere below, you imagine hidden ledgers, sealed in barrels, old bribes, wrapped in oilcloth scraps of plans eaten by mud and time. All that effort to build what could never be claimed out loud. You stand brushing marsh grass from your sleeves. A gull calls overhead, a final reminder that secrets here don't stay buried forever, just long enough for dawn to shift tides to turn, and another pair of clever hands to find what's worth hiding again. The marshland behind you fades into the low hum of the main yard once more. As you step back onto firmer ground, the dockyard seems busier than ever. Hammers tapping in steady rhythm, saws whispering through fresh planks, quiet voices murmuring about tides and timber. You pass by a stack of raw oak, its edges rough with bark, waiting for hands to bend it into the ribs of something that will slip out to sea without so much as a whispered name on the wind. Closer to the water's edge, a narrow slipway cradles a half-finished hull propped on thick blocks. 4 women work around it in easy silence. One holds a pot of hot pitch over a small fire, stirring it with a stick that drips black onto the sand. Another braces a plank, while her partner drives iron nails through it with short, precise strikes. The 4th, older than the rest, watches them all with a calm that says she's seen tides rise and fall 1,000 times before. You stand back, taking in the quiet choreography. Each woman knows her part, every motion practiced until it's second nature. Grip the plank, steady the seam, tap the nail brush, away stray sawdust. It's a dance that leaves no trace except the ship itself, and even that might vanish before the next moon. Some say these yards built twice as many ships as the records show, one for the crown, one for the shadows. Scholars still argue how much the royals knew and how much they chose to forget for the right price. Nearby, a small boy watches from the steps of a leaning shed leg, swinging eyes wide. His hair is a wild halo in the morning sun. Every so often, he hops down to fetch nails from a battered crate, passing them to the older woman when she crooks a finger his way. No one shushes him. When he asks too many questions, he's family here, whether by blood or by bond. Some say half the young boys who fetched nails in secret yards like this grew up to build their own hidden slipways, burying the same stories in planks, and pitch for the next set of curious eyes. Past the slipway, a thin path curls behind a stack of barrels. You follow its shoes crunching on stray chips of wood. The path opens into a low shed, so stuffed with tools, it's a wonder anyone can step inside. Hooks on the walls hold saws, hammers, augers, and planes, each one scarred by years of hidden work. A single lantern dangles from a nail in the low beam, its wick burning low, but steady. If you look close, you'll spot initials carved into the wooden handles. Some neat, some half-hidden, a language only those who worked here would understand. At the shed's back, a young woman sits cross-legged on the dirt floor, her lap full of iron nails. She dips each one in a small pot of oil, humming under her breath. The hum is old a tune her grandmother taught her when her mother hammered the same nails into planks that no king's ledger ever named. She glances up, eyes bright, a smear of pitch across her cheek, like a badge of defiance. Some researchers claim these small acts, oiling nails, marking tools, were secret signatures, a way to say, I was here even when no one dared write it down. You step back into the sun, just as a gust of wind rattles the slipway. A loose sheet of parchment flutters from a nearby barrel, skidding across the sand until it catches on your boot. When you bend to pick it up, you find a rough sketch, the curve of a hull, a few notations about rib spacing, a scribbled name that's half crossed out. You wonder how many scraps like this drifted away on careless breezes, secrets blown into reeds, buried under mud, lost to any historian who might wish to piece the truth back together. There's no scholarly consensus on whether these accidental trails were carelessness or careful misdirection. A low voice calls from the water's edge. You turn to see a small boat, drifting in oars, pulled by a woman you recognize from the shed. Her sleeves are rolled high, and her hands drip river water as she guides the skiff alongside the dock. Tied behind her in the boat's shallow belly is a bundle wrapped tight in canvas. Planks, maybe, or something rarer, smuggled plans, new tools, a bribe paid, not in coin, but in carefully bent iron. She catches your eye, nods once, then looks away, as if you're just another plank leaning against the slipway. The bundle lands on the dock with a soft thud. She tosses a rope to the boy. On the steps he ties it off with knots, learned young, the kind that hold even when the current pulls hardest. Somewhere in this dockyard, you realize every gesture hides another. A nod might mean a plan is safe. A rope thrown might bind more than a boat. It might bind a secret to this yard's quiet heart for another tide, another dawn. And the ledger, when it's written, will show nothing at all. A hush settles again as the small skiff bumps against the dock, the rope creaking gently under the boy's practiced knots. You watch the woman steady herself, boots thudding on damp boards as she lifts the canvas-wrapped bundle from the boat's shallow belly. With a quick glance around, she gestures to the boy, who drops down beside her without hesitation. Together, they roll the bundle toward a battered shed at the far end of the yard, its door barely clinging to rusted hinges, its planks weathered gray by decades of salty air. Inside, the shadows swallow them whole. You step closer, but pause at the threshold, careful not to creak the loose floorboards. From the gloom comes the soft rasp of fabric unwrapping a quiet sigh as the woman lays out the hidden cargo. It's not just planks. It's something older, heavier, a set of shipwright's tools, iron and wood, worn smooth by generations of hidden hands. There's an adze with a chipped handle, a draw knife whose blade glints faintly in the lantern light, a mallet dark with tar stains so deep they've become part of the wood. The boy runs his small fingers over each piece as if memorizing their weight. He looks up when she speaks soft words, more promise than lesson. He nods, lifts the adze tests, its heft, with a grin too wide for the hush around them. Some say tools like these were passed from mother to daughter, from aunt to niece, hidden behind hearthstones when inspectors came calling. Scholars still puzzle over scraps of household ledgers that mention kitchen repairs or salt barrels, but somehow cover the price of fresh nails and pitch instead. Outside the shed, the yard's heartbeat continues. Slow hammer taps the occasional shout muffled by the breeze. You drift toward the fence line, where old barrels lean against each other like gossiping neighbors. A scrap of cloth catches your eye fluttering from under one barrel's rim. Tug it free, and you find a handful of folded parchment sheets, each yellowed and fragile, but covered in sharp lines. Rough plans for Hull's side notes about bribes paid in barrels of salted fish. A name is scrawled at the bottom, but the ink runs halfway through. No one left to claim it now. Some researchers argue whether these notes were left on purpose, bait for spies, or simply forgotten in the rush to hide before dawn. A low laugh pulls your attention back to the slipway. There, two women lean over a fresh keel laid out on heavy blocks. One balances on a beam, tapping nails into a stubborn plank, while the other braces the wood with one shoulder. Between each hammer, blow they trade soft jokes. You can't quite catch bits of scandal rumors about whose bribe bought which inspector's silence this week. The laughter drifts over the river's gentle slap against the dock, a reminder that rebellion here tastes more like shared secrets than loud banners. Not far away, a man in a salt-stiff coat pretends to inspect a stack of barrels. His eyes flick past. The women linger a moment too long, then drift away. He jots a note on a slip of paper, tucks it inside his coat, and walks off without a word. Some say these watchers were royal informants, paid to turn a blind eye when the bribes were right, and to whisper to the crown when the tide of coin ran dry. Historians still debate which stories were betrayed and which stayed tucked under river mud forever. You wander behind the slipway to find another small launch ramp, half hidden by brambles. The boards creak under your weight, soft with moss and damp air. Here a keel lies covered by a rough tarp tied down with coarse rope. Someone has carved faint lines into the ramp's railing, names, initials, maybe just idle marks made during long hours waiting for the tide. Some believe these carvings were more than passing boredom signatures from women who knew no ledger would ever list their names. Researchers still squabble over whether any match the sparse diaries that remain pages warped and ink blurred by river mist. A faint shout carries from the riverbank. You turn to see the boy from the shed sprinting back down the slipway, arms wide as if he could hug the whole yard. He skids to a stop at the edge of the covered keel, peeks under the tarp, and laughs when a hidden cat bolts past him tail high. He chases the cat through the brambles, his voice bright in the hush of the hidden ramp. For a heartbeat, the secrets feel lighter, just a game of chase between a boy and a yard cat who knows every hiding place. And then the hammer strikes again, slow and steady. The river shifts against its muddy banks. The bribes, the plans, the false ledgers, they're all just pieces waiting to be fitted into a hull that might float tonight or sink tomorrow under another name. Somewhere out there, a pirate sloop drifts, sails furled low, waiting for a ship that no inspector ever counted, no king ever taxed. You step away from the ramp, the sound of hidden nails and soft laughter following you back toward the heart of the yard. In this place, rebellion doesn't shout. It hums, quiet, as a lullaby made of pitch tar and secrets too stubborn to drown. You find yourself drawn back to the slipway's edge, where the steady tap of hammers blends with the soft lap of the river. The sun has climbed higher now, brushing light across every plank and weathered beam, but it does nothing to expose the secrets hidden in plain sight. Here daylight is no enemy, just another cloak, beneath which quiet deals and disguised hands carry on their silent rebellion. Near a stack of thick oak beams, two women stand shoulder to shoulder, scraping old tar from a salvaged plank. One works a draw knife down the grain, long curls of pitch-black shavings piling at her boots. The other steadies the wood, humming under her breath, an old work song, low and wordless, almost drowned by the soft hiss of the blade. Some say these songs carried hidden meanings, warnings for prying ears. Historians still debate whether a certain rising note signaled the presence of an inspector, or if that's just dockyard folklore told over too many mugs of stale ale. Beside them, a young man face, still too soft for the rough work, sits cross-legged on an upturned barrel, mending a coil of rope. His fingers move quickly, knotting strands into patterns so tight, you wonder how they'll ever come undone. If you ask, he'll tell you he learned the knots from his mother, who learned them from hers, all the way back to a widow who once bribed a royal guard with a bushel of salted fish and a promise that no one would speak of what left the yard that night. Some scraps of old court records hint at such bribes, though scholars bicker endlessly over whether they were ever real. A sudden gust stirs the pile of tar shavings, sending black curls drifting across the yard like dark confetti. The older woman laughs a soft rolling sound that settles over the planks like a blanket. She swipes pitch from her cheek with the back of her hand and flicks it at her companion, who responds by tossing a shaving back at her head. For a moment, the yard feels almost ordinary, just workers ribbing each other, their laughter filling spaces where secrets once clung tight. You step around the stack boots, slipping on stray curls of tar. Ahead, an open ledger rests on a barrel top, weighed down by a stone to keep the pages from fluttering away. The ink is fresh, names, dates, numbers, that all look honest enough. But if you flip a page or two, you'll spot the faint smudge of a name, crossed out, another scribbled in its place. Same ship, different owner. Some bribes come in gold, others in barrels of salted cod or iron nails. The truth. It's always somewhere between the lines, salted away like the fish in crates that slip down river at dusk. Beyond the ledger, you catch sight of a figure stepping into the sunlight. She's tall, shoulders square under a rough linen coat, hair tucked under a cap, so plain it might belong to any dockhand in town. But her stride says, otherwise measured, confident every step, claiming space that history said she could never hold. She stops near the hull, resting on its blocks, palms the curved wood checks the seam where tar still seeps slow and sticky in the sun. A faint smile flickers, satisfaction, maybe a relief that tonight this vessel will slip past royal eyes once more. She calls to a boy perched on a nearby crate. He leaps down, feet thumping the dock as he drags a battered tool chest to her side. She flips it open inside rows of chisels, adds mallets wrapped in oilcloth to keep the damp at bay. Each tool is marked a scratch here, an initial there, tiny stories that never made it into any official yard record. Some researchers claim they've matched these marks to hidden diaries, scattered scraps of evidence that refuse to form a neat answer. A soft clang draws your gaze past them. At the far end of the slipway, a small forge flickers to life, its coals glowing dull red beneath a battered chimney pipe. An older man feeds it, scraps of tarred rope and splintered plank ends coaxing the flame high enough to heat nails for the day's last repairs. Near his feet, a girl squats on her haunches, blowing gently through a thin pipe to stoke the coals. She squints through the smoke eyes sharp with the same stubborn spark that fuels every secret hidden in this yard. The hammering pauses, then resumes in a new rhythm, slow and careful, as if testing the river's patience. You sense it in the hush. Between strikes tonight, a false name will slide down the slipway tarred hull skimming water that's learned to keep its mouth shut. Tomorrow, the ledger will show one ship, where there were really two, maybe three. Some will sail to royal ports, taxes paid, bribes, pocketed. Others will vanish into the salt wind names buried deeper than any keel. As the sun dips low, you feel the hush return, a promise nailed into planks, whispered in reeds, hidden behind ledgers that never tell the whole tale. As dusk begins to settle, its cool hand across the dockyard shadows gather in the corners where daylight can't pry. You find yourself near the waterline again, toes nearly touching the slick edge of the slipway. The hull resting above you creaks gently as it settles against its wooden braces, timbers expanding and contracting with the evening chill. Somewhere beyond the bend, the river shifts its weight, ready to carry away another name that never existed, at least not on paper. Near the slipway's foot, an old woman kneels beside a shallow trough filled with dark pitch. The surface reflects the lantern light, flickering from a hook overhead, dancing gold and black, like secrets swirling under the river's skin. She dips a broad brush into the pitch, lifts it dripping, and paints a slow, deliberate line along a fresh seam. Her movements are patient, practiced each stroke sealing not just wood against water, but truth against prying eyes. Some say women like her were the true keepers of these hidden yards, not just builders, but guardians of silence. Scholars still argue how much they knew, how much they chose to forget. Behind her, a narrow plank rests on a pair of crates. Bent low over it is a girl of no more than 14 sleeves, rolled high fingertips, black with pitch and sawdust. She scrapes the plank's edge with a small draw knife, lips moving, as she counts the tiny notches carved into the wood. They look like nothing at first, random scratches made by a dull blade or careless hammer. But listen to the older women at the tavern, and they'll tell you these marks were signposts, silent notes to anyone who knew how to read them. Maybe a symbol that meant safe to launch, or inspectors nearby, or just a claim to work that history tried to erase. Researchers keep coming back to these marks, hoping one day the code will crack itself open. A laugh drifts from the far end of the yard, where a rough circle has gathered near a sputtering fire pit. They stand in tight, leaning close shoulders, brushing as if afraid the wind might steal their secrets. One woman unwraps a cloth bundle in her lap. Inside glint tiny iron nails, each rolled in scraps of waxed linen. She hands them out like candies, payment promise proof that tonight another hull might slip free under the veil of false registry and new moon. A man tosses a wedge of cheese onto the circle's ragged blanket, a small nod that food still buys loyalty when coin is thin. You drift closer, catching stray words, talk of a fake inspector's badge, passed hand to hand, of a royal bribe repaid in barrels of salted cod no one ever planned to deliver. Stories swirl like pipe smoke above their heads. Some tales feel half-made unfinished thoughts nailed together just enough to float across the firelight. Some scholars swear these stories are nothing but dockyard myths, distractions from truth more mundane. But listen too long, and you'll hear the hush beneath the words, the quiet certainty that something here has always been hidden in plain sight. Near the circle, a boy fiddles with a small wooden whistle, its reed carved rough and patched with pitch to keep it from cracking. He blows a thin note sharp soft, then gone. The older women hush him with a wave. They glance toward the slipway as if that sound might carry secrets to ears better left deaf. The boy grins anyway, slipping the whistle into his pocket. Some say children like him carried more messages than grown men ever dared small enough to run unseen, clever enough to keep stories stitched inside a grin. Beyond the fire, another skiff drifts close to the bank, bumping softly against a half-submerged log. Its hull is bare, no name painted on its side, no flag to declare its master. Two figures crouch inside, wrapped tight in rough cloaks. One holds an oar across her knees. The other lifts a small bundle from beneath the bench. You can't see what's inside, but you know enough now to guess ledgers. With names, no one will read plans for faster rigs, fresh bribes to buy tomorrow's silence. The skiff nudges forward with the current oar, dipping just once to steer it clear of a snag. No words pass between the two, just a nod, a look back toward the slipway, then the hush of the river, swallowing them whole. As you stand in the darkening yard, you feel it settle into you, like the chill creeping from the riverbank. This place is no accident. Every plank nailed down with a lie, every seam sealed with a promise, every name crossed out and rewritten with pitch and tar. It's a quiet defiance nailed together by hands history was never meant to remember. Above you, the final brush of pitch glistens under the lantern's sway. The old woman straightens her back, brush clutched like a scepter eyes, soft with secrets she'll carry to her grave. Somewhere upriver, the wind picks up, pushing tonight's tide toward open water, ready to carry a new name no ledger will ever hold. The wind shifts again as night settles its cool hand over the dockyard, stirring the tar-sweet air and ruffling the edge of the old woman's shawl. She wipes her brush on a strip of coarse linen, careful not to let a single drop of pitch stain the fresh hull she's sealed so patiently. You stand a moment longer, watching her roll her shoulders, flex her stiff fingers. Then she leans close to the plank, and with a thumb smudged black, presses a small sign into the fresh tar. It looks like nothing, a curve, a nick, maybe just a stray smear. But if you knew where to look, you'd see a mark that says, "This was ours." Historians still dig through scattered diaries, hoping to match these thumbprints in pitch to a name, but the river has kept its silence longer than any record ever could. You step away from the slipway and follow the hush of voices drifting from a cluster of battered sheds near the yard's rear fence. Here, the lanterns glow softer, their light bleeding out through gaps in crooked planks. Inside, you find a half circle of tired backs bent over ledgers spread across a rough table. Fingers stained with ink flick through pages as slow murmurs trade names and numbers, some real, some rewritten on the fly. A barrel serves as a stool for the youngest girl in the group. She balances a thick ledger on her knee's tongue, poking at her lip as she copies names from one page to another. Her letter slant left the ink thin in places where the quill stutters. Some say these girls grew up fluent in lies, able to balance 3 ledgers in their heads, one for the crown, one for the buyer, and one for the truth only their sisters would know. A soft laugh bubbles up from the far corner, where a man sits, sharpening an adze on a smooth river stone. He scrapes the blade, slow testing the edge against his thumb. He's not a shipwright by trade, his coat's too fine under the dust, his boots better suited for a merchant's office than pitch-black slipways. But here, by lantern light, he's just another pair of eyes that knows when to look away and when to keep watch. Some say bribes flowed through men like him, like water through a cracked barrel, never staying long enough to stain their hands completely. Researchers still argue if the merchants who funded these hidden launches did so out of greed, rebellion, or both. From her perch on the barrel, the girl looks up, catches you staring, and flashes a grin, as crooked as the ledger in her lap. She taps the open page, one name carefully crossed out, a new one scrawled above in darker ink. A ship reborn with the stroke of a pen. She shrugs, like it's nothing, but you know now what it costs to keep a name hidden and a hull afloat. Somewhere beyond the fence, a royal inspector is probably waiting for a bribe already spent before he arrived. Outside the shed, the breeze carries the scent of salt and smoke. You follow it to a clearing behind a leaning wall, where a stack of barrels waits to be rolled down to the small dock at low tide. Each barrel is marked with chalk fish tar rope. Inside, you know there might be none of those things at all. Some say the best secrets travel in plain sight, blueprints tucked under dried fish gold coins buried in tar, or messages scratched into the inside of barrel lids where no taxman thinks to look. There is no scholarly consensus on how many pirate captains owed their swift rigs to these hidden caches, but old salt-bitten rumors insist more than a few. A soft mule catches your ear. Near the barrels, the dockyard cat appears again, tail high, paws silent on rough boards. It circles your legs, once then slips away between the stacks, tail flicking like a whispered warning. You follow the cat's path, with your eyes spotting a faint trail of worn earth that leads past the barrels and down to the water's edge. There, half hidden by weeds, you see it, a narrow skiff so low in the tide you'd miss it if the lantern's flicker hadn't caught the rim. Wrapped tight in the skiff's belly is a bundle no bigger than your forearm oilcloth, bound in rough twine. A figure steps out of the dark. She's young eyes, clear and steady beneath a cap, too big for her cropped hair. She nods once, a silent greeting, then stoops to lift the bundle into the skiff. No words pass between you, none needed. Her boots make no sound as she pushes the boat off the mud, guiding it with a single oar until the river catches it. In seconds, she's a shape swallowed by reeds and shadows. You stand in the hush that follows lantern glow, dancing on the barrels behind you. Somewhere across the water, the skiff will dock at another hidden yard, another set of hands waiting to finish what this place began. No name, no mark, No official record, just a quiet promise, nailed deep into planks and pitch secrets kept secrets carried. The river hushes around you as you stand by the water's edge, listening for the faint splash of the skiff's oar long after it's slipped out of sight. The dockyard behind you is softer now. Hammer blows, less frantic voices, low and warm, as lanterns flicker awake along the crooked fences. The barrels stand stacked like silent witnesses, their chalk marks ghostly in the shifting glow. For a moment, the slipway feels almost like any honest yard at closing time, except for the way shadows cling to the corners where secrets sleep. You turn from the water and wander back toward the main shed, stepping over stray coils of rope and old tar buckets that leak their thick scent into the evening air. By the door, a small group gathers around a battered crate turned makeshift bench. On it rests a ledger cracked at the spine and held together by a strip of leather gone soft with age. A woman with hair tied under a faded cap turns the pages slow, her fingertip tracing each line before nodding to the man beside her. He scratches something onto a slip of parchment, folds it twice, and tucks it inside his coat pocket. Some say these folded notes were more valuable than gold silent contracts that made ships appear or vanish before the crown could count them. Behind them, a young girl leans against the wall, chewing on a piece of dried fish eyes, darting between the crate and the slipway beyond. She holds a short stick in one hand, tapping it against her leg in an absent rhythm that matches the slow thud of a hammer nearby. If you asked her what she's waiting for, she'd shrug and say nothing at all, though the half-hidden smile curling her mouth might tell a different story. Some claim the youngest eyes saw the most the slip of a coin under a ledger, the quick nod that signaled a false name, the tiny mark pressed into wet tar at the last minute. A low whistle cuts through the dusk, a soft two-note call that makes the group straighten just slightly. From behind the shed's side wall, another figure appears, hauling a bundle of cloth-wrapped shapes over one shoulder. He drops the load by the crate, with a grunt unrolls it fast. Inside lie 3 iron tools, their handles slick with pitch and salt. And adds a caulking mallet, a long-handled chisel worn smooth in the grip their blades dark with oil. The woman bends close, inspecting each with the care you'd give a newborn. She nods once, satisfied. Some say tools like these were harder to come by than gold coins when the yard ran low, hidden behind hearthstones, or buried under floorboards where no royal inspector would think to dig. You shift your weight as another hammer strike rings through the yard, measured patient, a steady tap that drifts across the river like a promise. Near the slipway's base, 2 women brace a fresh plank against the keel shoulders, bent feet planted wide in the damp earth. They speak little, only the occasional mutter about pitch pots and tide times, their breath ghosting in the cool air. Now and then, they lean back to inspect their work palms pressed flat to the wood as if feeling for secrets no eye could catch. A few paces away, the dock cat reappears, tail flicking, as it prowls along a stack of spare beams. It pauses to sniff at a loose plank, then slips behind the stack as if following a trail only it can see. Some swear these cats carried stories in their fur-soft spies drifting from shed to slipway ears pricked for the sound of coins changing hands or a name muttered where it shouldn't be. Of course, there's no record of a single cat ever selling a secret, only that they were always there, tail curled round, a hidden ledger, or curled on the lap of the woman bribing the inspector. By now, the moon peaks silver above the dark tree line across the river. Its reflection quivers in the ripples that lap at the slipway's base. You catch sight of another boat, drifting out a half-finished hull tar, glistening where the last seam was sealed not an hour ago. It rides low in the water canvas, tied tight over the deck. No name on its side, no flag at its mast. On the ledger by the crate, it's listed under one name tonight, and by dawn, it might be gone under another, traded hidden reborn in a port where no crown's coin can find it. The young girl leans from the shed doorway, stick still tapping at her knee. She watches the boat vanish into the moonlit hush eyes, half-lidded, as if half dreaming. Maybe she's counting the bribes she's seen pass from palm to palm. Maybe she's memorizing which mark goes where, on which plank. Or maybe she's just waiting her turn, ready to slip her own name into the tide when the time comes. And somewhere far downriver, the skiff from earlier drifts to shore in the reeds, another piece of this quiet rebellion, another secret the river keeps in its dark, slow heart. A faint breeze curls through the dockyard, carrying the briny bite of the river, mixed with tar's heavy sweetness. Lanterns sway on crooked hooks, nailed to shed beams, their glow flickering over stacks of timber and rough coils of hemp rope. You follow the soft hiss of whispered talk, past the slipway's edge boots, crunching on scattered shavings until you come upon a half-collapsed lean-to, crouched behind the largest shed. From outside, it looks like it holds nothing but junk old barrels, warped planks, rusted nails spilled like seeds in the dirt. But step closer, and you see the truth tucked between the shadows. Inside, 3 figures crouch around a crate, flipped on its side, its open face lined with scraps of cloth and a battered ledger balanced across its top. A single stub of candle gutters in a glass jar, dripping wax onto a pile of soiled rags. One figure's sleeves rolled past scarred elbows drags a stub of charcoal over the ledger's page, adding numbers in quick strokes. Another leans close, peering through strands of hair that keep slipping loose from her knot. She mutters low, correcting a line here, erasing another there. Her fingertip smears a name into a black smudge gone from the record before it ever really lived. Beside them, the third figure cradles something unexpected, a roll of rough canvas wrapped around what might be a child's blanket. But when he peels it back, you glimpse the gleam of metal, small tools, wrapped tight, kept dry against river damp. Tiny augers, a brass caliper gone green with age, a bone-handled knife, with a blade so thin you'd swear it might snap. Some say these tools were passed down through generations tucked under floorboards during raids hidden behind hearth bricks when inspectors knocked. Researchers still argue whether the same few tools appear in ledgers scattered across towns miles apart, their journey traced by rumors and thumbprints in pitch. You shift your weight, making the dirt floor crunch under your boot. The 3 paws' eyes flicking up. A breathless moment passes, as if the lean-to's rotting walls might swallow you whole for listening in. Then the man rolls the canvas back up, ties it with a length of sail cord, and tucks it under his arm. The ledger closes with a dry clap. Just like that, the moment is gone, packed away, like the boat names they erase and rewrite every dusk. Outside, you slip into the night again, passing a half-empty tar barrel that oozes its scent into the chill air. Beyond it, laughter drifts from an open shed door where shadows huddle near the warmth of an old brazier. You peer in to find a gathering that feels almost like any workyard breakbacks, bent near the heat mugs, lifted boots scuffed against the floor. But here, the talk is softer, the laughter edged with caution. Someone murmurs about an inspector's visit, bought off with barrels of salted fish that never once saw salt. Another voice, older, gravel, rough warns, of ledgers found burned behind the tavern. Last week, evidence turned to ash before royal eyes could claim it. Near the brazier, a woman balances a length of rope across her knees. Her fingers work the strands apart and weave them back again, splicing a clean join where frayed ends met. She does it by feel, alone, eyes, half-lidded lips, twitching as she hums an old tune that drifts like smoke between the brazier's crackle. Some say these rope tricks were more than work. They were signals too. A coil left hanging by the tavern door might tell a passing hand that tonight's launch was safe, that the river's mouth was clear, that the next bribe landed in the right pocket. Scholars still chase scraps of diaries describing rope signs, but never agree on whether these tricks were true code or dockside fairy tales. A boy dozes at her feet, curled near a battered oilskin bag stuffed with stray nails and iron hooks. Every so often, he shifts in his sleep, mumbling nonsense, dreaming perhaps of slipways and river tides, of boats sliding into black water without a whisper. His arm rests on a plank initials carved deep, where no inspector would care to look, marks that say, "I was here," even when the records forget. Past the shed, near the dock's far end, another skiff drifts in, bumping soft against the post. A shape leans over the edge, pushes a small bundle ashore. Wrapped in cloth, it disappears into the waiting hands of a girl standing barefoot on the slick planks. She darts away, without a word, bundle pressed tight to her chest, hair loose and wild in the wind. No name shouted, no light shone, just another ledger's ghost finding safe harbor under a false dawn. And overhead, the lanterns swing, marking time by creak and flicker. Each pass of light spills across hidden marks, secret thumbprints, thumb-smudged ledgers no crown ever truly owns. Beyond the leaning sheds and quiet brazier, the night deepens, wrapping the dockyard in the kind of silence only secrets know. You step along a crooked plank walkway that creaks with every careful footfall. It leads you past piles of split oak and barrels marked with chalk signs no taxman would understand. The river hums at your side, its slow lap against the slipway, timed to the hush of soft voices that drift from somewhere ahead. Near a sagging fence, a group huddles in the dark, five shadows crouched low around a battered table knocked together from crate lids and old beams. A single lantern dangles from a nail driven into a fence post, its flame guttering in the breeze. They don't flinch when you appear. These aren't the sort who scare easy. One woman leans over a sheet of parchment, her finger tracing a line that curves like a river's bend. Another, younger, taps a blunt nail on the wood, a quiet drumbeat that keeps time with her whispered plan. On the parchment, a sketch of a ship takes shape. Nothing fancy, just lines and notes in a cramped hand. But here, those lines mean everything. Ribs set low for speed, a keel curved just so to ride high in shallow water, perfect for slipping past patrols at night. Some say these designs were never written down, in full past mouth to ear, marked in scraps, or scratched in tarred beams where no one thought to look. Historians dig for fragments in half-burnt letters, but the full secrets float away each time they think they found them. A man with sleeves rolled to his elbows nudges a stack of ledgers closer to the lantern's light. He flips one open pages soft and stained at the edges. Names cross out under his fingertip, replaced by lines of looping script that match nothing above. You catch the faint glint of a coin passed from one palm to another, barely a flicker in the half-light. Some say these coins made entire ships vanish, overnight, registered taxed, then gone downriver to a name no king's man could ever summon back. A hush falls over the circle as a small girl appears at the fence's broken gap. She can't be more than 10 bare feet, black, with pitch hair stuck to her cheek. She carries a bundle under her arm, wrapped in an old apron tied tight with fishing line. She kneels beside the table and pushes the bundle toward the woman tracing the hull. The cloth unwraps with a soft sigh. Inside lie iron nails heavy and rough, their heads still tacky with tar. There's pride in the girl's eyes as she watches the older woman inspect each nail. No ledgers, for these just hands passing promise to hands. Past the fence, the river glitters under the slip of moonlight, breaking through ragged clouds. You follow its edge boots, sinking into the soft bank, where footprints blur in the damp earth. Here, behind a screen of reeds and leaning rowboats, two more figures work by the low flicker of a stubby candle stuck in an old wine bottle. They crouch over a length of plank balanced across a pair of barrels. One runs her thumb along a groove, cut shallow and straight. The other lifts a branding iron from a bed of coals, its tip glowing dull red. With a nod, she presses the iron to the plank. A hiss of steam, the sharp scent of scorched wood. Then the mark is there. A swirl, a hook, a sign no ledger will list, but every sister in the yard will know by heart. Some scholars still argue if these brands were code for safe passage or just a quiet claim of credit in a world that wouldn't give it openly. They lift the plank together, slide it under a tarp beside the half-finished hull. No words pass, only the hush of the river and the steady breath of the wind through the reeds. They pause to watch the moon slip behind a cloud again, shadows reclaiming the slipway like a promise kept. You step back to the main yard, passing piles of sawdust that smell of pitch and salt air. A cat slinks across your path tail, flicking like a question you'll never quite answer. Beyond the stacks of timber, you glimpse the ledger circle breaking apart, papers folded into pockets, lantern pinched out between calloused fingers. Coins clink once, then hush. Deal's done for now. Plans drift like the tide. Above you a gull cries the sound sharp and strange in the dark. Maybe it knows what no record will ever say, that tonight another ship is half born, half lied about half free, already under the hush of these secret hands. You leave the hush of the fence line behind and follow the creaking walkway back toward the slipway, where the river's dark skin shivers under a rising breeze. Overhead, the moon slips in and out of tattered clouds, silver light glancing off tar pots, open barrels, the curve of a hull waiting for the tide. Even now, with most voices fallen quiet, the yard isn't truly asleep. Secrets don't sleep, not when there's still pitch, warm in the pot, and ledgers with names that need rewriting before dawn. Near the slipway's base, two figures stand ankle-deep in the shallow's oilskins, wrapped tight around their waists to keep the river's chill at bay. Between them bobs a flat skiff hull, patched with boards, so new they almost gleam in the moonlight. They work in near silence. One dips a brush into a bucket of thick black pitch, slapping it onto the seams that run like thin scars along the skiff's belly. The other balances a scrap of parchment on a barrel lid, scribbling a line here, scratching one out there. If you squint, you can just make out what it says: a new name, a false date, an owner who exists only until this hull clears the bend. Some say these fake registries live short lives, burned buried in wet soil, or dropped overboard in lead-sealed jars the moment the prow kissed open sea. Researchers still argue if these hidden launches ever left traces that washed up miles away in some rival yard's ledger. A soft splash catches your ear. A girl wades past them, barefoot skirts hitched high. She carries a coil of rope over one shoulder, its frayed ends damp and heavy. She stops where the skiff noses the bank, ties the rope quick around an old post driven deep into mud and time. The knot she ties is simple, but look closer, and you'll see the sly twist that turns a common dock knot into a sign, a signal to those watching from shadows that tonight's slip is paid for and safe. Some claim entire families could read these knots like a secret language. Some historians scoff, but in the hush of this yard, you see the truth tied neat against rough wood. Up the slipway, closer to the sheds, a single lantern burns low on an overturned crate. Its light falls over a page held down by a flat stone. Beside it sits an older woman, eyes sharp under a wool cap, fingers stained pitch black. She leans on a small hammer resting in her palm like a scepter. Around her neck hangs a strip of rawhide tied with a tiny iron nail, an old charm they say to keep ships true and storms at bay. She hums as she works, reading the ledger line by line, crossing out words that no longer belong. Every so often, she lifts her head, listening for a splash too loud or a voice too bold. When all stays quiet, her pen scratches again, rewriting history, one hush at a time. Behind her, the dock cat prowls through scattered shavings, tail low ears flicking at the faint crack of a plank shifting on its blocks. The cat pauses near the edge of a covered pile where tarred beams rest under burlap. It sniffs at a loose corner nose brushing a hidden gap. If you knelt and lifted the cover, you'd find more than timber, small chests, sealed tight iron nails, tucked in linen pouches, scraps of parchment covered in numbers that will never match any royal tally. Some swear these hidden caches kept the shipwrights working long after honest coin ran dry. Others claim they were bait-proof for bribed inspectors that their silence had weight worth keeping. The tide shushes closer now, licking the skiff's belly like a quiet promise. The two figures in the shallows check the last seam, brush the final pitch. One lifts the rope coil from the girl's shoulder and tugs the knot twice, testing not the line, but the sign it holds. A soft nod passes between them, and then they're done. By first light, this patched-together hull will be halfway down river flagged under a name so new, even the cat won't remember it. Back up the slipway, the woman with the nail around her neck blows out the lantern. Darkness swallows the crate, the ledger, the page she's folded into her pocket. She stands, slow, stiff knees popping in the chill. Her hum fades into the hush of the yard, but the mark she's left will drift under the river's skin long after the hammering stops. Above you, the clouds break just enough for moonlight to silver the slipway one last time. You see the girl step from water to plank skirts, dripping rope marks bright on her palms, proof of a deal tied and carried by quiet hands. Somewhere out in the reeds, another whisper waits its turn. A hush, heavier than pitch, settles over the yard as the river swells up to kiss the slipway's edge. You stand in the shadows of stacked timber, the rough scent of tar and salt sharp in the damp air. The skiff that just took its false name and hidden cargo drifts out of sight beyond the bend, swallowed by reeds and the river's slow breath. You wonder how many such boats slip through here, how many still drift somewhere beyond any king's reach, sails patched with the same secrecy that stains these boards under your boots. Behind you, a low door creaks open. Warm light spills out for a heartbeat, then narrows as a figure eases through and pulls it shut behind her. She moves quietly, careful, on the loose planks. In her hands, she carries a small box corners banded with iron, and the lid bound tight with tarred rope. She sets it on an old barrel near the fence lantern light, flickering over her face, a map of worry lines and pitch smudges. With a small blade, she cuts the rope, lifts the lid. Inside lie papers folded so many times the edges look soft as old cloth. She lifts one, holds it up to the lantern. You glimpse a curve of ink, half a hull. Plan a list of names, maybe both at once. She folds it again, tucks it into her coat, then slides the box back under the barrel. Some say these hidden boxes hold the truest ledgers, proof, not of crime, but of who was really here when the official books stayed blank. A faint scrape draws your ear to the far side of the fence. A boy, no taller than the barrel itself, eases a loose plank aside and ducks into the yard. His pockets bulge with something that clinks coins maybe, or iron nails paid out by a soft hand in the tavern's back room. He pauses when he sees the woman by the barrel. She gives him a look, sharp, soft, knowing. He grins back, slips the plank shut behind him, and disappears into the shed, where the hush of whispered counting begins again. Closer to the slipway, the last hammer strikes for the night, ring out slow and patient. Two women brace a plank against a waiting keel, pressing pitch into the seam with careful thumbs. They work by feel more than sight now, trusting the warmth under their nails, the way the wood gives just enough when the join is true. Each knock of the hammer is like a heartbeat in the dark, measuring out secrets in iron and tar. Some scholars say these final strikes were rituals as much as repairs, tokens of luck, to keep a ship from splitting wide under storms or royal guns. Others dismiss the idea, but you hear it now in the hush, a kind of prayer nailed straight into the ribs. You drift past a pile of scrap timber where the dockyard cat dozes curled on a discarded tarp that smells of fish and river mud. Its tail flicks at the sound of your step, but it doesn't lift its head. Maybe it's dreaming of gulls and warm hearths. Or maybe it's listening same as you to the river's hush beyond the boards. Near the fence's corner, a single lantern still burns where three figures lean over an open ledger. Their shadows lean long across the dirt, stretching toward the slipway like dark fingers. One dips. A quill scratches out a line. Another mutters a number that never happened. The third flips a coin between his knuckles' eyes, darting to the path that leads back to town. Some say it's not the holes or plans that keep these yards hidden. It's this, the soft slip of coins in the dark, the hush that says not tonight to a guard's question, the ledger that writes a truth no crown will ever hold. Researchers will puzzle over these ledgers for centuries, but tonight you see exactly what they miss. Names crossed out, not to deceive, but to protect. You stand one last time at the slipway's edge, boots sunk in damp earth, where hundreds of keels have left their marks. Somewhere beyond the bend, a ship drifts under false moonlight ribs, kissed by hands that history pretends never existed. Another will follow tomorrow, and another the night after that, as long as pitch bubbles warm in hidden sheds and quiet hammer taps echo like lullabies across the river's hush. When dawn comes, the yard will look the same, empty slipways, honest ledgers on the master's desk, barrels stacked neat for the crown's inspectors. But here, in the hush before first light, you know better. You've felt the warmth in the pitch, the marks beneath the keel. The coins slipped soft from hand to hand. And when the last nail taps home, it carries every secret straight into the water, gone before the sun can name it. Let the slipway fade now. Let the river hush itself back to calm. Picture the last soft brush of pitch, the lantern's glow snuffed one by one, the cat curling deeper into its tarp nest. Let your breath slow, like the tide easing out to see secrets sinking under black water where no ledger will ever find them. The dockyard sleeps, but somewhere out there, a nameless hull drifts free, carrying quiet rebellion nailed into every plank. Drift with it now. Let the river carry your thoughts past bribes and ledgers, past false names and thumb-smudged pages, past the watchful eyes that always arrive too late. If your eyes stay heavy, perhaps leave behind a sleepy thought. Where are you listening from? And which forgotten ship would you sail tonight?